about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show.
Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies, we got some shirts, we got some tanks coming up, we got some booty shorts, we got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up, fangs out. Devil, my friend, locations are part of today's episode. As always, we know that you come to us from the depths of hell, up through the inferno. This vampire and his beloved Mrs. Vamp have spread their wings a little bit and decided to spend a little time back home as we are coming to the beloved Fangs from Salem, Massachusetts. Which city? Hanging around in the area, our beloved Vamp Fangs that we love, shopping around in a couple of our other favorite places. But which city, USA, Salem, is where we are coming from. So you know that your beloved vampire is in a good mood, but you know you've got to be in a particularly good mood because, as the saying goes, idle hands are the devil's playground.
Oh yeah, you know what I mean? And when those hands are free and you're not doing anything, they tend to do something really bad. Whether it's flogging the molly, as they want to call it nowadays, or killing somebody, strangling somebody, the hands are always doing something evil. And then, like I said, idle hands bring on the devil's work. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about 1999's Idle Hands with Devin Sawa.
Absolutely. The letter I in our alphabets of horror. But yes, Devin Sawa, a young, pretty new to the scene Jessica Alba. But also Vivica A. Fox is involved in this movie as well, who's done many roles as well. And being that the vampire does enjoy his hockey, Eldon Ratliff is involved in this movie, who's Fulton Reed from the Mighty Ducks, as well as a beloved favor of ours, the great, the funny, the talented, and a little bit evil Seth Green.
Oh yeah, and it was even directed by Rodman Flender, who, as Fangs might know, he directed Leprechaun 2. So which
yep, we kind of bookended around that movie. We didn't full on discuss that movie, but we definitely bookended it because, like with our Fangs, we did a little bit of Leprechaun and Leprechaun 3 action a while back.
Oh yeah, and that's the cool thing about this movie too, with the young Jessica Alba, and even with Jessica Alba talking about this is one of the movies that she kind of doesn't like the least, which is a reason why she's a crazy actress, and I love her in a lot of her movies, but she's got such a weird and specific suspected clause in her repertoire where she doesn't like having nudity in her movies. And all her movies, which if you see her nude in her movies, it's either a body double or it's visually done. Which, I mean, in one aspect, I commend her for sticking to your guns and wanting to do that. But then again, she plays a lot of these roles in these movies that are very sexual, that have nudity in it. And it's like, yeah, now you're taking away from somebody else that's okay with doing nudity. So, like in this one, yeah, I think she was still kind of green and young. I know she talks about, because this movie, she's not wearing very much clothes throughout this movie. I mean, there's no per nudity in this for her, but she is wearing booty shorts, with her body sticking out and stuff like that. But all of us in the underworld of hell love Jessica Alba in this movie because it's Jessica Alba in the flesh, legitimately in the flesh before any CGI is done.
Yep, absolutely, my friend. And the movie kicks off with a good old fashioned murder, which we can always appreciate that. As it starts off with this couple, basically just wrapping up their evening, an older couple, a parents couple, wrapping up their evening on Halloween, extinguishing out the displays, putting out the candles, putting away the Halloween decorations and whatnot, and wondering why their son didn't blow out the candles because they don't want the house to burn down. Doing parents things, and then they see this writing on the wall, or in this case, the ceiling, about don't look under the bed, and they're like, he's probably just it's probably just a prank from our son, where the mom puts it off as like, no, our son would never do something like that, and dad's basically, nah, man, that our son's a lazy piece of shit, he would totally do something like that. And then in typical kind of like creeps and spooks kind of fashion, they hear noises, they investigate, they run from the things that scare them, and get dragged under the bed in a nice little splash of blood to open up the movie. But then that bridges in to just common life as you're introduced to Devon Sawa's Anton character, and the fact that he's just a lazy guy, likes to smoke his weed, likes to listen to Rancid, which is the opening music of the show, as he then goes to just kind of hang out with his stoner buddies in Eldon's character and Seth's character.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Like I said, it's a cool story. Kind of just it's very 90s. That late 90s feel to it. It basically kind of like reminds of like a back when my human years, being just going around, chilling around, watching movies, watching music videos, smoking the weed, and just being lazy, just lazy fucks to begin with. But yeah, I like it because it's just basically like it's just a cool like beginning premise. That, oh my God, there's somebody gonna kill us, and the sound. And then I just love it. He just wakes up in the morning. He's living life. He's like, Mom, we're out of milk, and we're out of this, and we're out of dog food, and goes and sits and just doesn't even, is completely oblivious of all the stuff he's doing. All of a sudden, like, makes a sandwich, and all of a sudden sees some blood, and he's like, oh shit, there's a killer in the house, because they know about this killer that's been going around,
Yep.
affecting somebody, because he just killed two twins that worked at a restaurant, like a Taco Bell or like something like that, like a food chain. So he's like, oh shit, man, killer's in the house. I love the fact that he's kind of hiding behind the dog, and he pushes the dog across the kitchen, and kind of like hiding behind the dog, and basically like the dog's gonna save him. Yeah,
Right.
and then he's just like trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and yeah, then it's like he goes over to his friend's house and stuff like that to see whether or not they have any weed. And then that's when we get introduced to Jessica Alba character, that he'd been kind of following her for a while, kind of
Anton,
stalking
here comes
her.
your woman.
Yep, he's been stalking her for a while, and she drops her notebook, and I love that part because he's just like singing the music of her song, and it's just crazy, and then you find, he goes over to her house, and he's like, oh fuck, I'm getting the hell out of here and shit like that. It's very, it's that stoner kind of teen angst, beginning with a little bit of that, horror aspect, that you kind of get to kind of begin with. And that's the cool thing about that. You said, with the music, man, it's definitely very 90s music.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely all over the place as far as the music goes. Because you got some pump, you got some rock. He's watching music videos, and the music videos you get to see a white zombie video, a Rob Zombie video for Dragula.
Yep.
There's Two Live Crew, Pop That Pussy video, which is probably my favorite part of the movie.
Of course it is.
He's trying to. Just because of the fact that he's like, hey man, he tells his friends like, hey man, my parents are dead, because he finds his parents dead. And he's like, this killer's come to my house and killed my friends, and he's like, dude, check this out. And they're like, oh my god, and he thinks that they're staring at his dead parents, and they realize that Two Live Crew's on the video, and they're like, dude, they're like, man, I thought they banned this, and they're over hey, dancing to it. It's probably one of my, between that scene and another scene, and we'll talk in a little bit, it's probably my favorite scene in the whole entire movie. But I love it because it's got that, it's got Offspring music in it, and it also has the Offspring in the movie themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure, because it's also right around that time for that scene actually, where he's trying to like let people know, he's trying to tell his friends who are pretty much just as fucked up as he is, but he's like, dude, like somebody killed my parents, and they're not even paying attention, like you addressed. But then also it's what leads into the idle hands, part of the movie, where it basically shows the killer, which was Anton because of his hand. But the other thing that's also funny too is because build up to this leads you into the idea of the fact that people just know that Anton's just a whatever guy. When he would attend class, he would just make fun of people and stuff like that. Because, at one point when he's just wandering around going to his friend's house, he comes across the two local police officers that, were, geeks back in high school that he used to make fun of. And now they're authority figures. So they like, they're like making fun of him, and they're like, well, we're gonna fine you, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do that. So they're also antagonists, where they're sticking their noses where they don't belong, which we're about to talk about. Because when it is shown that Anton's the killer, he offs his best friends in two pretty epic ways. I mean, he smashes a beer bottle into like a jagged knife dagger, and stabs Seth Green right through the face with it and the forehead with it. And then, literally throws a saw blade like a frisbee and beheads Penub, the Eldon Ratliff character. And he thinks it's just kind of a wrap. He's just kind of like, fuck, man, like, I just killed my best friends. Like, I suck. And then it's funny because he's literally burying them in shallow graves in his backyard, saying a prayer, but they're kind of sent back as just not so much demons or anything like that, because he even makes a funny pun where he's like, well, what are you guys? Are you flesh-eating zombies sent back from hell and blah, blah, blah? And they're just like, no, why would we go to hell? It's not like, we're not bad people. It's not like we're good people, but at least we don't go around killing people. Like, but basically they're kind of sent back as like, basically as like zombies, where they're just kind of casual zombies. They don't really have to do anything. They're just kind of around, which I think is cool for the dynamic and the comedy factor, but they don't really add anything in particular other than almost casual Jiminy Cricket style advice, which I think is really funny. And then them having conversations on the couch where Anton's talking to these two dead people. The police officers get a noise complaint and check on the house, realize that it's Anton's house, sees him sitting on the couch with these dead people. He's like, oh my God, Anton's the killer. We need to catch him ourselves so we get all the credit. But then, of course, it is a supernatural, movie. So, of course, they stood no chance. And Anton just takes them out too.
Yeah, and it's funny too because the I know the one cop is our buddy that will be we've discussed before, and People Under the Stairs, where wrote Sean Whalen is one
Yep.
of the cops. And yeah, the cool thing about this movie too is there's so many callbacks to other movies. The town that they filmed this in is the same town that the original Halloween was filmed in, so it still has
Yep.
that Halloween kind of look to it. The school that they filmed the school in is the same school they filmed Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie in. So it's got you get that kind of like feel where you're getting towards other ones. And then like I said, yeah, once he kills his best friends and stuff like that, that's when all the they're kind of like your comedian sidekicks, like you said. You know they're trying to help out, and all of a sudden he grabs the little um electric knife, and he's like, "Look at me,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
Leatherface," which is probably like one of my favorite parts of the whole entire movie because it's just the comedy aspect of like these two, stoner friends with them, and then being zombies, and the makeup for them was awesome. I mean, it looked
Super
really
good.
awesome with his head being cut off, and then Seth's character walking around with a beer bottle or bottle that's every time he moves you can hear the liquid inside of it jiggling and stuff like that. It was so cool. And then and then even going into it further with him trying to possess his hand, it's very like Sam Raimi and Evil Dead with Bruce Campbell, where he's trying to stop his hand, and he goes and talks to the girl, and he goes to the house, and he's trying to do crazy stuff with it, and he ties it up for a minute, and she's like, "Ooh, Anton, you're a little kinky." He's just trying to
Yeah.
keep this hand from doing it. Eventually, he gets tired of, this hand killing his friends and doing all this stupid shit. He decides to like, hey, let me just take this hand off. And then
Yep.
he cuts his hand, and just like any typical horror movie, the hand stays alive, and then that brings in another huge actor with us, and the guy who plays the hand, who's played the hand in million things, but he also played the hand in Adam's Family, is the guy who plays
Yep.
the creepy hand. So it's kind of cool that anytime, especially at that time, when you have a hand that's done somewhat physically. I mean, I know they digitally add to it, but when they like really have somebody's hand, it's cool that they always call on the on thing to come out and do the job for it.
Absolutely, because it's also very Doug Jones-ish as well, too. With any type of great or unique skinny monster actor, skinny monster creature that you have. Doug Jones is often the first phone call when it comes to that. So I always thought that was very, very cool that when it came to Idle Hands, they tied it in with the fact that it was the same actor whose hand played Thing in the Addams Family, which I always thought was really cool. And the other thing that's actually also pretty rad too is around this same time of not only Anton being led around town by his hand, you know, leading up to when he cuts off his hand, idle, a la Evil Dead style, we're also introduced to the first kind of main secondary character, which is like the town like heavy metal guy who doesn't really care about anything other than his truck. Like he's only ever listening to Shout at the Devil from Motley Crue. It's the only song that's ever playing for not only his scenes, but when his truck is turned on. And they even show it. It's literally like a cassette tape that's got one song on it that just plays in loop. Whether it was playing when he was fixing his truck, when it was playing when he was driving through the drive-through, when Anton was trying to get info from him about Idle Hands, and it was playing in a later scene we're about to discuss when they go to high school. But I think it's hilarious that this is like the only song that's a, you know, that accompanies this character while he's wearing a Quiet Riot t-shirt, but the only song associated with him is Shout at the Devil from Motley Crue. And you're introduced to him as somewhat of an antagonist while he then becomes an ally. But it's the fact that, like, he's just kind of around. He's just the guy that likes to work on his truck and is focusing on getting laid. Because at the other time, same time is when you're also introduced to the other basically main secondary character, which is Vivica A. Fox's character, who is basically a demon hunter or a demon slayer who's been tracking these deaths of these of the hand, basically, because it hasn't always been Anton. Basically what it is it's a possession of a lazy individual's hand. And once the individual is either captured or killed, if the individual is killed, that's a wrap. But if they get captured, basically the hand will kill the owner and go about its business and find the next lazy person. Because earlier in the movie, it does show Vivica's character thinking she found him, but it basically turned out to be a biker guy in jail, but he was already dead and his hand was all withered. And you hear her say, shit, I missed it again. So, but yeah, about a third into the movie is when you've basically been introduced to your six main characters. You've got Anton and his two friends. You've got Jessica Alba's character. And now you've got the kind of antagonist meets colleague in, the local heavy metal guy, and Vivica A. Fox's character, who's basically the traveling demon slayer trying to find Anton.
Yeah. And another cool thing about the character that's always working on his truck that you get introduced and stuff like that. It's been brought to my attention that when I was looking into it, and I didn't really even hardcore notice it, but it may be a homage to it because of it being in the 90s and stuff like that. But apparently his license plate spells out big truck, which is possibility a coal chamber reference, even though he's listening to mainly 80s hair metal.
Yeah.
But being the fact that it's a 90s movie and stuff like that, it may be a homage to some coal chamber. So I thought that was kind of cool. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, it is. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't even really pay attention that his truck said big truck, which I mean makes sense because it's a big monster truck. So I mean that could be one reason why they decided to do it that way. But then again, it could have been a little nod to Cold Chamber. But yeah, it's just crazy. Like the whole entire Vivica character going after. She's like a line of druidists that go around and find finds these idle hand demons and kills. You got that character. You got the love interest. You got the two guys, the two friends, and you got this other kind of guy that everybody assumes knows more about this devil shit. It's because he listens to Motley Crue. And that's the whole reason why Anton goes even to talk to him, because he's like, dude, you listen to this devil music, and he's like, oh, just because I listen to this music doesn't necessarily mean I'm a devil worshiper,
Right.
and it's just cool, and it's like another another little throwback to stuff. His name is Devon Sawa's character's name in this movie is Anton, which is obviously after Anton LaVey, who
Yep.
founded the Satanic Church, and so that's kind of a cool throwback. But the one thing that I like about this movie, though, when you find out that Anton is the killer, which is like something that you don't find out until like a little bit later in the movie, when you start they see the parents are dead, they see that they wrote Ant in the blood, you see this shirt that's kind of ripped, and they're even their stoner friends are like, dude, the killer was wearing your shirt, instead of just being like, to begin with saying, oh shit, Anton, you're the killer, right? Which eventually they do. The first thing they think to is like, they say, wait, the killer was wearing your shirt, and then they see Ant on the ground in blood. They're like, the killer, they got killed by ants. Like that's not like how
So much
stupid.
just stoner comedy.
Yeah. But then, like I said, but if you watch it, if you pay really close attention to this movie, it basically almost tells you who the killer is right away before you even know anything about the parents being killed, right? So I'm gonna set it up for you, and it's not really a spoiler because you already know everybody got that. So the whole entire time you got this movie, right? And the parents are being killed, right? So you find out the parents, going there, they're looking they're looking at the ceiling. They see I'm under the bed. They're scared. The dad goes and checks. He gets whacked. The mom goes back in the bedroom, goes under the bed, gets killed. But the whole entire time you had this thing, right? Anton is up in his room, you assume, and they're trying to call him up, but he's probably stoned or sleeping or whatever. And at one point in the movie, you have the cat who does the typical horror movie faction, jumps on the bed, scares the shit out of everybody, and they go, oh, it's just the cat. So the cat is downstairs, right? And whenever Anton wakes up in the morning, he gets up. He, the first thing he does, he goes up, wakes up, gets up, opens up his attic, and before he goes in, the cat is up there.
Yeah.
So that already tells you right there that if the cat was downstairs and his thing was shut, there's no way that cat can get into the attic unless Anton was downstairs at one point and then went back up into the attic, which basically kind of is a little bit, if you pay attention to it, you'll already know that Anton's the killer because the cat's up in his room. And obviously so I was like, when I was watching that, I was like, I don't think I ever paid attention to the fact that, the cat was in the beginning, which is kind of the main clue that, he would have been the killer to begin with because the cat was up in his room. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Oh, for sure. No, definitely. And that's the other thing, too, that I do like about this movie is Mrs. Vamp approved because both the cat and the dog are fine and safe, and there's no issues or injuries when it comes to the animals in idle hands. So anybody, any of our fangs out there that have a Mr. or Mrs. that are very much not into like animal deaths when it comes to horror movies, Idle Hands is Mrs. Vamp approved because she does not get down with that.
Yeah, you kind of think maybe the cat's going to get it because at one point he gets a hold of him and he whips him around. But luckily the cat goes, lands in the bushes and it's one of his 9 lives and he does live. The funny thing about the dog, though, even though the dog does live, if you pay really, really close attention, which is on the IMDb page of notes, which is funny that people pay attention, but when he's pushing the dog out in the kitchen, the dog has a little red rocket. Dog's a little excited to be in that movie.
Absolutely, for sure. So as we bring it back around, right around this time is we get into the point where they're starting to figure out what they need to do. So Heavy Metal Guy and Vivica's character have found Anton and basically gotten to the point where, Vivica's trying to kill him because that's what she knows to do to stop the possessions and stop the killings is by killing basically the source, which is hilarious too, because at the same time, Rocker is trying to hook up with her. Like throughout the whole rest of the movie, he's just trying to get his axle greased by this lady. And they catch him because not only is Rocker beating on him because at one point, he stole his truck to get some answers. Vivica is trying to straight up kill him. But when he shows them that he's cut off his hand, they freak out because Rocker is just straight up like, oh my God, basically, oh, that's gross. And then Vivica's character is like, holy shit, you let it loose? Which was, again, very Evil Dead style, because that's exactly how it was in the second Evil Dead. It's just because you cut off the hand doesn't mean the hand was going to wither up and go away. So they're trying to get away from the hand as well as track it down, which leads all of the characters to meet up with Jessica Alba and her best friend's character at the school dance that night. The whole Halloween night, but because in that area with all the murders, there's no trick-or-treating for that Halloween. There's a certain curfew, so they're all going to go to the dance, which they normally wouldn't do. But they're basically like, look, man, because of this killer out there, there's no trick-or-treating allowed to happen. There's a curfew. This dumbass dance is the only option, so we might as well go because again, Penub and Seth, they're just kind of out to get a piece. So they're just like, Penub's kind of like, well, I bet I win best costume, even though they know they're dead. Penub's like, hey, I bet I hook up. Chicks dig winners. So they're making their way to the dance, which is hilarious. It's kind of hilarious in its own right because Anton's cut off his right hand, and when they steal his truck to get to the dance to save his girlfriend, basically to save Jessica Alba, the truck is a stick shift. So he's like, God damn it, the truck couldn't be automatic. So Seth Green has to fucking, shift the truck so they can even get where they need to go. And then that's what also leads to almost kind of like old school Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like movie style, a series of just like fun, unique kills in the dance. So the hand is on a rampage, castrates the principal and takes him out, sharpens his fingers. The band that happens to be playing during the dance is The Offspring, the actual band The Offspring. And Anton's trying to let everybody know to be careful, and almost a la Hocus Pocus style, when Max and Danny were trying to let everybody know. They don't take him seriously. Dexter from The Offspring is like, dude, whatever, haha, get off the stage. We got shit to do. And the hand comes down and rips off Dexter Holland's, like, the top of his head, and obviously sends the whole gym into a mass hysteria.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. It was one of those, like, you get to kill, a cool famous musician because at that time that was probably like Offspring's peak,
Yeah.
right as they were starting to get really, really, really huge. So
Yeah,
it's cool to see them.
it was right before Pretty Fly with for a White Guy came out.
Yeah. So it was like right in their beginning of their peak of the, they had their album. So I thought it was kind of cool to have them, at the party, at the school dance and stuff like that playing. And then, like I said, being able to kill, to say that, you've been killed in a horror movie is it's a cool little side note to have. But yeah, overall, like I said, yeah, the when it gets to the dance, yeah, it's when the fun starts happening, That's when all the blood, it starts getting bloody, it starts getting gorier. You have the girlfriend and Jessica Alba's character trying to escape, and they're going through this little, like, this little freaking, like, hidden way where it's like in the air ducts and stuff like that. But then the fan is still running, so they're trying to figure out how the hell they're gonna get through that. She puts her shoe in it. Obviously, she goes down. The one girl is being scared, and of course, you knew it was gonna happen. She's going down the road. The fan goes and splatters her all over the place, and in typical fashion of a Seth Green and Eldon's character, like, well, yep, there goes your chances of getting laid tonight now, because your girlfriend's in pieces now.
I love that scene so much, dude. Just for cheeky trying to get laid humor. It's just so funny because at one point during the dance, Penub and Jessica's friend are making out. And Seth's like, ew, that's disgusting. He's like, bro, you're dead. And Penub's like, whatever, dude. I don't care, dude. I'm getting some tonight. So when Jessica's friend gets splattered through the fan, the fact is they're looking at everything, and Seth just looks at Penub and chuckles, and he's like, now you're really not going to get any. And Penub's character is like, it's just unfair. It's just one of my favorite lines in the movie because it's so typical. It's exactly what you would expect from this kind of rom-com horror goofy splatterfest, like that kind of humor. It's like peanut butter and jelly. It's just the way it's going to be. But I just loved the timing of the little chuckle where you just see that your friend got fucked, and he's just like, sucks to be you, dude. Now you're really not going to get any. It's just well played. It's just well timed. To be frank, it's the exact same thing that you would say to me or I would say to you.
Yeah, and then it gets towards the end. All of a sudden, the hand captures Jessica Alba's character, ties her up to a car, and it's on a mechanic ramp that's getting ready to smash her into the ceiling, and the ceiling has the Baphomet on there, so to send her to hell and all that kind of stuff like that. So they're trying to figure out, and then another typical stoner fashion comedy. They see this welded shop freaking awesome book bag slash bong, and just like everybody that's in high school, that's ever been in high school, you always have that friend that goes, oh yeah, I made that, or I made this, or I made that. Of course, Nub's character's like, I made this cool bomb, and it's like, you don't. It's Seth's character like, you don't even take workshop. Like, well, how would you make this bomb? But they basically kind of get the hand stoned, and then the hand goes after Seth, and they throw the knife at it. And another part of the movie that I really really love is like, she throws the knife at it, it goes into him, kind of sparkles and goes like a
It,
dead firework.
I'm going
And
to
he's
let
like,
you
really? That's
continue. I'm going
that's
to let
it?
you continue with this scene, but yeah, I have to say this real quick before you continue. It's the greatest, most underwhelming kill, well, saving of the day possible.
Yeah. But yeah. So the knife goes into him. It sparkles. It does like a firecracker, and even Seth's character's like, really? That's it?
What
No,
hits him in the
no,
chest?
no, no. He's like, that's legitimate. The end of it. And he was like so disappointed. I mean, I guess you can tell he's happy that they defeated the bad guy at the end, but it's such a, like you said, it's such like a womp 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 kind of moment
It's
because you expect
it's
something more bigger grand scale.
It's so amazing. And it's funny. And so, for what it's worth, Fangs, on the DVD, there is an alternative ending that shows that they really were considering a big, grand ending. But that's for you guys to purchase and watch. That's on you. But no, I love it because you're right. Because the hand goes for its final attack. Vivica throws the knife and hits the hand, and it hits Seth in the chest. So it literally impales Seth with this knife. And just like you said, it just shimmies and shakes and boop, into a little cloud of smoke. And that's Seth's whole argument. He's like, wait, that's it? Like, no big epic death. It just evaporates. He's like, look, dude, no, don't get me wrong. I'm glad everybody's okay. But he's like, but that was fucking weak. And
Yeah,
it's so great because I'm like, in reality, it didn't even need the commentary from Seth, but I really love that he did basically commentary this epic fail, like you said, because that's exactly what it looks like. You would have expected some lightning bolt, inferno that you sent up or something like that, bro. Like something like that. You would expect some major demonic thing to happen and for it to just basically kind of like vibrate and just poof into some smoke and that's it is so underwhelming. But for a movie like this, it's so perfect. It's so apropos. And I just think the fact that it was commentated on in the movie makes it that much better. And I just fucking
yeah.
love it.
Oh yeah, and
It's so great.
yeah, and the cool thing about it too is it goes right into the second part of that I love is Vivica Fox's characters. Well, shit, I killed the demon now. Now it's time for some druid ritual sex. You ready? And and the guy's like, oh fuck yeah, I'm finally gonna be able to score. He's been, like you said, he's been trying to score with her the whole entire time and putting on
Yeah.
the moves, and she's kind of like, not really being really receptive because she's on focus of trying to kill this demon hand, and then now he finally gets to have the ritualistic sex now. So
Right.
yeah, he got super happy about that. That's the cool thing about this thing is, and the one thing that we didn't talk about when this movie came out. I know, like I said, the movie is has its fun and it has its gags and its horror and stuff like that. But apparently, when this movie was coming out, was roughly around the time that Columbine came out.
Yeah,
Columbine stuff happened,
you're
which
right.
kind of pushed this movie a little bit further from being released because of the nature of this movie. You have some similarities, where the parents are getting killed. There's some kids getting killed at school and stuff like that. So I guess
Mhm.
like when this movie came out, they kind of had to push it a little bit further. It was supposed to be released earlier, but I guess they wanted to wait a little longer for all the Columbine stuff to kind of calm down. Even though, like I said, even though this movie really has no similarities to Columbine and like the actions of what happened, but just because of the
Yeah.
fact that it's about a school and about kids and stuff like that. So I guess like the director and all them and the producers and all that decided to cool it down, which is different. So but out there, if you do want to see if you're into the Columbine kind of stuff like that, though, there was a movie that came out shortly after that called Duck, that was
Yes.
very, very Columbine inspired horror movie. So that one's pretty cool if you're into like that kind of not saying that you're into schools being shot in real life and stuff like
But
that, but
yeah,
into that.
documentary, situational, mass hysteria
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. That like it was an aspect that I didn't realize until doing a little bit of research of this movie, that was when they made this movie, it was gonna come out earlier, but they
Yeah.
waited a little bit longer because of the whole Columbine stuff.
Yeah, because I believe because the movie was originally scheduled for basically like a beginning of the school year release, which is around the time that that actually did happen. So it ended up, you know, for the style of movie, it kind of worked out better, I guess. But of course, we understand that when it comes to movies being put out by big box office things, like timing is everything, and a lot of money goes into promotions and when you're releasing something. So when things get pushed, it can be detrimental and it's expensive. But yeah, from my understanding, yeah, this movie was supposed to get basically an early school year release, which is when that situation happened. So it ended up getting released more in the Halloween season, which ended up kind of working out, probably overall better. Obviously, not just because of the nature of similarities of the scenes, but the fact of the matter is, it is still a horror movie. Yes, it's that rom com, stoner comedy as well, but it's still a horror movie first, so it kind of worked out when it came to that. But then, as we draw towards the obituaries, Devil, we're on our very final scene, which, of course, this would just happen to stoners being stupid. You think that everything's done, it's a wrap, we're good to go. And then, just typical stoner clumsiness, they're trying to pass the bong. It hits Penub. He missteps and he ends up hitting the crank that's holding the car that Jessica was strapped to because it was going to crush her against the ceiling. It hits the crank that lowers the car where Anton and Jessica happen to be making out under, like, oh, I love you, baby, we survived. And it crushes Anton to death. And so, of course, you're like, oh my God, okay, that's anticlimactic. How the fuck would you do that? Why would you end it that way? And the light from heaven comes down because guess basically as a job well done, you know, Seth and Eldon are getting their wings. And they're basically like, you coming, Anton? And it kind of leads it at that, which morphs into the final scene, which is that Anton survives because he denies himself heaven to stay alive on Earth, basically to be pampered by Jessica Alba, which I'm sure there's plenty of kids out there that wouldn't hate that scenario. But he even says it. She's like, man, it is so awesome and so bitching that you blew off heaven for me. And he's like, are you kidding, man? Getting pampered by you is better than heaven could be. And so, he is stuck in the hotel in a full body cast, and he sees, and all of a sudden, Penub and Seth Green, appear, out of nowhere, and he's talking to them, but they're now no longer in physical form. So the nurse and Jessica just assume he's hallucinating. So Jessica's like, "Well, I'm gonna leave because you need your rest and stuff," and the nurse is like, "He needs to rest." and then they decide to leave so he can get rest. And he starts freaking out because written on the ceiling is the same font and the same words as to open the movie. I'm under your bed. And he's screaming. And the movie literally just ends with Seth and Eldon just walking down the hallway, wanting to go check out the nurses and be like, yeah, he does scream like a girl, but how long do you think we should take before we tell him we're the ones who wrote that on the ceiling?
Yeah, I love it. It's that last little like, haha kind of moment to the movie where it's like, yeah, it's like goes back to like the very beginning of like what started this whole catalyst of being scared as them reading that the I'm under the bed, and it's like it's a last like yeah, we might be angels and and have our wings, but we're still gonna fuck with Anton a little bit while we have the chances.
There's still a little devil in us.
Yep.
So when it comes to the obituaries, my friend, let's talk about how we rank this. Overall, like, look, I've always loved this movie. It's always been one of my favorite movies. I've seen it a million times. I'll see it another million, you know. But, you know, so I could easily rank this movie very high because of how much I really do love this movie. Overall, look, it's a very basic story. It's fun, it's flirty, it's got a great young cast, but there's nothing overly sexy about it. It doesn't have crazy redeeming qualities of what you would consider like cinematic gold. Like the Criterion Collection isn't going to look at a movie like Idle Hands and be like, that is gold. That's what it needs to be. That's what Silence of the Lambs and A Clockwork Orange and Antichrist are for. So, like, in reality, the movie's probably like a 6, but I do love this movie. I don't want to give it too much love just on my account, but I would solidly give this a 6.5. It's an enjoyable time. I enjoy this movie. In my brain of enjoyment, me personally, the movie's like a 9, but that's not what we do on this show. I love the movie, like like the Fangs know, but we're objective in the way that we talk about and rate these movies. So yeah, it's not an overly sexy movie. It's very basic. It's shot very basic. It's clean. It's crisp. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely not a B-rate horror movie. It's traditionally, it has some money behind it, but it's not an overly spectacular movie collectively. But I do enjoy it. But being objectively, I give it a 6.5.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I might give it a little bit more of a thing. But yeah, I mean, yeah, personally, yeah, I'm with you. I think that this movie is like a 9, too. I love the movie. I think it's fun. I love the campiness of it. I love the horror throwbacks to it. I love the cast that they have because it's a cast that that I like in this movie and other movies. I do like like I said, the music and all that kind of stuff like that to it. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely down with that. But for me, I'm like I said, as far as personally and stuff like that, I would give it at least a little bump it up to like a 7, just because it is a movie that's rewatchable 9 million times, and I've seen it,
Yep.
and it's definitely a movie out there that's worth the things if they haven't watched it, and it's got sort of like a cult following now. A lot of people started watching it now, and with Devin Sawa doing a lot of these cons and stuff like that, it is somebody that somebody could get to meet for it. So yeah, it's definitely on a list of like, as far as like these kind of comedy horror movies, it's definitely on that list of like a higher one. I mean, there's obviously there are better ones than this, but there are a lot of worse ones than this too. So
For
yeah,
sure.
I think a 7 for me is pretty good for it.
Cool, Devil. I'm definitely with you, bro. No worries. I mean, the Fangs know by now we don't do 0.25s and we don't do 0.75s. We're just going to roll right to that. I've already made it abundantly clear to the Fangs how I feel about this movie personally and how much I do love it. So we're just gonna roll right up to the 7 with you, man. I think that's fantastic. I'm down for it. You know, the music is great. And again, yes, you're right. The cast I love. I wouldn't hate for Jessica Alba to do some cons. She doesn't do them at the moment. Doesn't mean she won't. But Seth does them. You know, Anton does them. I have met Eldon Ratliff at the moment as well at some cons. So the cast does get around. That would be very cool. I do think Vivica is a little bit too A-list personally. You're not likely going to see her do that kind of stuff. But I definitely think it would be really cool. So yeah, man, we're just going to roll it right up that full half point, man, right up to a 7. So Fangs, that's the way that we are going to do this. From the devil, from the vampire, alphabets of horror, letter I, Idle Hands from 1999. A 7 is the way that we are going to put it on the obituaries. Horns up, fangs out.
Devil, my friend. Oh, yeah. I think if there's anybody who would know hot things, it's you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's only right that you let our beloved Fangs know what they can order now, courtesy of Coney Island.
Oh, yeah, man. We're in the kitchen. You know it gets hot in the kitchen. And what else better for your finger foods, for your tacos, for your victims that you may be eating? Maybe some sauce. And you should get it from the sauce boss. Coney Island sauce. Oh, yeah. Get some of that good stuff. Oh, yeah. You like to sprinkle it on anything. You could sprinkle it on your fingers. Sprinkle it on your toes. Sprinkle it on your hose. Anything you want to sprinkle goes.
Absolutely. We have partnered with Coney Island Saucery. Aaron is fantastic. We really appreciate all the love he's given to the show, and we're very, very pleased and honored to be a part of him. So he's got 4 sauces out of various heat levels to enjoy on all your various foods, but also for anybody who is already following his socials, our socials, or is about to be, newly announced partnership with Slayer.
Slayer, oh yeah.
Coney Island
burning to fire.
Oh yeah, Coney Island Saucery does have a Slayer brand hot sauce coming out very, very soon. And so make sure that you check that out for all your various levels of spice. This is Vampire and the Devil, Coney Island Saucery. Horns up, fangs out.
What's up? It's the devil again, and we're bringing back that segment where we watch movies with the word devil in it. This time we're watching Mark of the Devil. Have you seen this yet with Udo Kier? Ooh, it's so European. Ooh, so brutal about all the witches that were killed and burnt in the stake in Europe for being witches and witchcraft. Not too many devils in this movie, but they have the mark of the devil, and you know how I love to mark them. Mark those bodies all up. Ooh yeah. Ooh yeah. What do you think about this movie? It was banned in so many countries for being brutal, but you watch movies now, it's pretty tame. What do you think?
Happy Halloween, ghouls and fangs, fiends alike. It's your ever so beloved fiery devil and your ever so dark moded vampire coming at you guys to have a little bit of Halloween fun with this particular showdown. We thought we would take a couple of interesting designed movies to pit against each other, while we decided it would be fun to pit a very popular franchise against a rather Halloween as Halloween movie. There's definitely no way that you're never going to consider one of these movies to be a Halloween movie. And while the other movie we're going to talk about takes place on Halloween, it's definitely a little bit more of that blood splash style as we pit Vampire's Trick or Treat with his beloved Sam against, the devil and Art the Clown's Terrifier.
Oh yeah, it's time to, put on those little masks and get ready for some good treats. Just make sure there's no razor blades in there, and as we celebrate Samhain or Samhain, or maybe both, depending on how you want to say it. Sometimes they say it both ways. So depending on how you want to say it anyway, it's Halloween time. it's time to put on those knickers and go get some candy.
Absolutely. It kind of depends on what given Danzig interview you're listening to at any given time as to which pronunciation we decide to go with when it comes to there. I mean, but let's talk a little bit about, Pumpkin Faces in the Dark. And we're going to start off with Terrifier, I think, because as we've noticed, my beloved devil, it has definitely taken on a life of its own. So Terrifier goes back to like Kickstarter stuff that you and I remember when Damien wanted that to be a movie. And, it was like, Kickstarter, Indiegogo style stuff where it was like, hey, there's this new idea, this new movie. If you want to be a backer of it to help bring it to life, we would definitely love that. The character actually stems from a series of short anthology movies, almost a little Trick or Treat-esque, which is actually what makes this a very interesting showdown. But the Art the Clown character actually stems back to the All Hallows Eve movie, of which there were actually two of them, but the first All Hallows Eve movie, and it was actually played by Mike as opposed to David Now.
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, it's the Terrifier now has kind of become this huge, like underground, independent, like movie, like mecca. It's crazy how much this movie has blown up, especially with like him doing these movies old school style where there's no studio backing. It's all funded by himself, or like you said, crowdfunding, or going and finding people who want to help produce these films, which makes it easier for him to do whatever the fuck he wants to do in these movies. He can go to the extreme. He can have these movies be super violent and super crazy and not have to worry about a studio giving you, okay, you can't do this, or you can't do that, or you can't say this, or you can't say that. And then, like I said, to me it's brought back that kind of like the big huge scares and the horror genre. It reminds me a little bit of like Blair Witchy kind of, where that movie was so very low independent and made shit ton of money. And like I said, with these Terrifiers, you have the All Hallows Eve, and then you had Terrifier 1, and then Terrifier 1 did really, really well, and Terrifier 2 just blew the Terrifier 1, like as far as like money wise, just out of the park how big it is. And now to the fact that we're going to be celebrating this Halloween a third Terrifier, which is actually getting a theatrical release, just shows you that, hey, like independent filmmakers still can go and get their movies put into movie theaters. And like, yeah, I love the fact that, yeah, those ones now they're kind of bringing back the Terrifier 1 and Terrifier 2 in the theaters and stuff like that we get to see all this stuff. So it's awesome that like these DIY low budget horror movies can do well. And that's what I love about the Terrifier series, is it is low budget and it's low budget, low quality, not low quality, but low, as far as that kind of stuff was it. I mean, the amount of money that they took to make this movie is really low compared to like multi-million dollar movies that are still considered low budgets. Yet the art and the graphics and the special effects in this movie are bar none better than most movies with $100 million budgets.
Yeah. No, 100%. And don't get us wrong, Fangs. Like, Devil and I are well aware that the second Terrifier movie was released in theaters, but it was really originally released just as a, hey, after all these years and this underground cult following, we're going to release this as a weekend deal. We're going to put this out for a few days, like, Thursday to Sunday, Friday to Saturday, however it was originally designed. I don't totally remember specifically. But then just that explosion, and then hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars later, they're like, okay, no, we've got something here. Might as well get while the getting's good. And it stayed in the theaters, that way. But then, just like you said, my friend, absolutely, this third Terrifier movie that's coming out has been a complete, proper build-up, trailers, cast, announcements, with a real release date in theaters that you know isn't designed to be like, well, hey, we're going to throw this against the wall and just kind of see what sticks. You know it's going to go to theaters. It's going to have a whole build up, and it's going to have a whole red carpet, and then it'll be in theaters for a certain amount of time. So it's definitely cool when it comes to that. But getting back to the first Terrifier movie, since that's what we're mentioning right now, is the cool thing I always thought was very interesting and kind of fun because it speaks to the low budget, is if you're really splitting hairs when it comes to this movie's only got 4 real members of the cast in it. You know, and of course, I'm not talking about like the collateral damage that you learn about in this movie, murders that Art has done and stuff like that, you know, people in hospitals, people in TV studios, all of which we'll get to. But the movie itself really only circles around 4 actual characters. You've got Art, of course. You've got the original 2 girls, which are coming back from a Halloween party trying to get some food and end up with a flat tire. And then you've got the sister of one of the girls kind of basically coming to the rescue.
Yeah. And then, like I said, it's, you know, when this movie, when it went from the All Hallows Eve to Terrifier, you know, they did make a big change, like we said, you know, with Art the Clown. You know, he kind of wanted to make it more, you know, no disrespect to Michael's character in All Hallows Eve because it was so awesome, but with that being a full length movie, I guess Mike didn't want to go through the makeup and do all that kind of stuff again. So obviously, Damien had to find someone else, and what better to find as far as when it comes to Art the Clown than David, who is a professional mime. And
Yep.
that's what I always make about these movies. It's like theoretically his name is Art the Clown, but Art's really a mime, if anything, because he doesn't talk. He's you know, even like I said, because it helps that David's, you know, background is in miming. But yeah, I mean, his character is very, very that more of that mime, where most clown movies, you know, going from like It or any of those ones, they talk to you and, you know, and tell you, hey, kitty, you want some of this or that, where it's a perfectly 100% silent, you know, silent role for him. So he has to rely a lot on the way he emotes, his, you know, the way his eyes look or the way he kind of just invites people. And then, you know, you just add a little bit of that comedy that's throughout this movie, which I wouldn't go as far as saying that Terrifier is a comedy horror. It just has that little spots of dark humor
Yeah.
that he does. He does something really fucked up, and even his character in this movie is like doing something really drastic and disgusting and horrible, yet laughing the whole entire time. You know what I mean? But silently laughing. He's not like ha ha ha. He's just, you know, I love the fact that, and that's what I said. I was like, I think it was perfect for that role for them to have somebody that was a mime, because, you know, with this character being more of a silent killer and more like, you know, that mime thing, it made it perfect than someone who is just an actor going to play that under the role.
Absolutely. Because even in injuries that he sustains as the killer trying to get his victims, you know, he'll scream in silence, which, you know, is always, you know, very, very cool. And there's plenty of like little, you know, comedy things that he's done in this movie, you know, like whether it be searching through this bag of crazy that he's always carrying around for something as, you know, comical as just looking for coins, or like, you know, trying to find something to use on somebody. But it's always this, like, he doesn't say anything, he doesn't really do anything, but it's that same kind of, you know, body language, that same type of stuff, because that's what always made mimes, you know, so funny, was about facial expressions and their various reactions, you know, whether it be like, you know, the stuck in a box type thing, or the pulling the lasso or lanyard kind of thing, and to, you know, try to open the window, kind of all of that stuff. And the fact that I remember reading an interview one time, or just seeing a blurb of David talking about getting the role, where his agent had said that there was this ad out for this role, and he was like, dude, get me an audition for this, I will win this, like, this is what I do, and I know I'll kill it as this character, which I think is super duper cool. Because of course, when it does come to a lot of actors trying to find work, you know, it's a matter of, you know, trying to find work and making it work. It's really awesome, especially for a movie that started cult and is still kind of that way, but obviously is becoming a huge like franchise and whatnot, and the merchandise is just completely off the charts right now. But the fact that for someone to have that kind of enthusiasm as well, to be like, hey guy that represents me, or hey girl that represents me, like get me this audition. Very kind of like Dickie Roberts, former child star. If any of the fangs have seen that movie, about when he's talking with when David Spade's talking to his agent about like, hey man, no, you need to do what you got to do to get me this audition. So I love the fact that David had that kind of like passion for the role, knowing that he would excel at it. And it's kind of cool to see it like circle all back around with like legitimate success, being able to make real money and stuff like that. And he's also become a guy that you and I have talked to and met frequently at the various cons.
Yeah. And like I said, it's just a cool, like I said, just throughout the whole entire movie, you know what I mean? Like you said, when the girls are going to try to find something to eat, and he's just kind of sitting there being very creepy and just kind of like doing this like creepy weird stuff, and it's just like, then all of a sudden just like do something and crack a smile, or just like look at him really really fast, or like I said, my favorite part of the movie, and when he goes into some of the stuff that he does, is like all of a sudden he just finds a tricycle and just starts riding around a tricycle bike, and it's just like, what the hell kind of stupid shit is this? But it just works so perfectly, because it's just like, it's just that oddball, like, this guy's a killer, and he's just completely insane, and he enjoys loving and doing all the stuff that he does. And that's the other thing I like about Art the Clown, because you have like, he is, can nowadays, with this like franchise getting big and big, he's kind of on that level as like of a Jason and a Michael Myers and your Leatherface and your Chucky. He's become a horror icon, and he kind of goes against the tropes of horror icons, where they tend to use knives and weapons and stuff like that, which he does. But he's also not afraid to pull out a gun and start shooting people too, which I like. He'll use anything that he can as far as an arsenal of weapons. And I like that. And I mean, and then, like I said, a lot of that's kind of, a lot of his character, I think, is rooted in real life serial killer stuff, because in the movie where he traps the one girl, and you finally get the big reveal where he gets the other girl, and she's up, and she sees her friend, and she's laying upside down naked, and he saws her in half, and which is basically uh exactly what happened with Ed Gein. Ed Gein had saw women in half like that. There have been photos of carcasses laying upside down like in that way. So it's kind of cool where this character is sort of like a homage, or like a homage to like real life serial killers, and then your normal killers, like like I said, with that Michael Myers and those horror movie villains.
Absolutely. And it also is an homage to actual legit old school torture as well. Like, that me and Mrs. Vamp went to Salem recently, and they actually just opened a new exhibit last year that we were able to see a couple weeks ago in the Salem Museum of Torture. And sawing is actually one of the tortures that they featured in that museum, which is very cool, where it shows, the huge long saw that two people would use to cut through a tree, but two people would also use it to saw a body straight in half, as a form of punishment for a guilty party. So I also actually think that's super duper cool, where not only does Damien have the wherewithal to look back at serial killers that preceded him and preceded this character, but even to take it back also almost John Kramer style, to where like the people that put together the Saw movies even did their research on like what humans have done to each other over the years. But I think that's like super duper cool. And leading in and around that part is really cool, because it starts off in that diner, with Art just being creepy, and you got the one little bleach blonde bimbo that's trying to like take selfies and get likes and stuff like that, who's the one who ends up getting sawed in half, while the other friend kind of has more sense in the situation. And then they're driving, have a flat tire. Of course, they're starting to get suspicious of the creep that did it to them. And so she reaches out to her sister to come and save the day, kind of a thing, and be like, hey, I'm stranded. I'm really, really sorry, but like I need to get home, and my car's fucked, and we just don't really feel overly safe. And that's what kind of leads into everything, where you've got the full sawing in half, which is demise of the friend. You've got the first sister that you're introduced to, who, and that's the thing that's actually kind of crazy about the Art character, is literally everything's a weapon, and you actually don't see a lot of things coming. Like at one point, when the first sister, the main original sister, is kind of fighting for her life and trying to get everything done, all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, fucking Art just pulls out a gun and pow! And it is like that simple. Like it is just a wrap. And you're kind of like, wait a minute. So many previous serial killers, like, were used to using like something specific or something that made sense for what they were doing. But this dude just has like a gun handy to just like whack somebody. Like, where does that come from? And so, I mean, that's always a super crazy but interesting part when it comes to the Art character, that it doesn't really matter. Like, anything's a weapon. Like, he'll take anybody out with extreme prejudice. I mean, there's no sense in trying to get into his brain, because you really just don't know what's going on in there at any given time. And it leads to the final sister coming in and fighting for her life, and you think that she's wounded Art enough to get him to run away, whether it be like stabbing him in the foot or just doing all this stuff to make him get away. And the police and the medics are on their way. They're like basically almost there to save the day. And Art just plows through this repair shop, mechanic shop type thing, and just smokes her with a car for the medics and the police to all get there to see her still alive while he's eating her face. Just complete cannibal style.
It's just pretty gnarly and stuff like that. But then it goes back into that where I was talking about, like, a little bit of that comedy horror where he's trying to suffocate her with a bag, and you're suffocating somebody and she's trying to get out of it, and you're trying to get this plastic bag off your head. You're gonna rip it open, and she eventually rips it open, and he gets pissed off at the bag. He's like, "What the fuck, bag? Like, you were supposed to fucking kill her. Like, what the shit?" You can just feel like his like anger, and like he's just looking like, "The hell, man." But yeah,
it's piece of shit.
Yeah, he's a piece of shit. But yeah, I like it because it shows you that too. And the cool thing about the him eating the face, it kind of which is a cool thing that I like about this movie, is it alludes to stuff that you weren't 100% sure. Beginning of the movie, it starts off with a woman that survived Art the Clown, and she's misfigured, and she's on a talk show, and she's talking about being misfigured. You see her and she's all mangled up, and then you see Art the Clown getting kind of pissed off and laughing and kicks the TV, or kills the TV and stuff like that. And you assume, okay, yeah, later on. But then when this movie progresses and the girl who gets eaten, her face eaten, you find out that that's actually the girl from the beginning of the movie. So you're like, oh, okay, so yeah, it's just so crazy. And then and then it ultimately goes into like him just going around killing everybody and fucking everybody all up and stuff like that. And then in weird fashion, I guess, for a serial killer movie, there is no. I mean, I guess you have the in a lot of these things. Oh, come on, fucking really, people. Fucking damn fucking scammers. I haven't had nobody calling me all goddamn day. And the second I fucking record, it's like, oh, no, he's recording. I'm going to fucking scam him. But anyway, what was I? No, now I got to try to get back to what I was saying.
Where in serial killer fashion.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. So I'll cut it back. Yeah, in the serial killing fashion, you know what I mean? And in most of these movies, there's a final girl. And in this movie, there really isn't a final girl, and there's really no heroic person in this movie because Art the Clown takes himself out. He takes a freaking gun to his head and blows his own brains out, and you're like, what the fuck? Who? What? This guy is completely insane. He just decided to kill himself and say, fuck it, I'm not getting busted. They take him to the morgue, and they think that he's dead, and then you realize that Art the Clown is not just your average everyday Joe killer. He's some kind of supernatural being.
And that's the crazy thing too, is while there kind of is a final girl, it's so opposite end of the spectrum from what you expect of the final girl. You kind of expect the final girl to kind of, to still have all her teeth and like still basically get to live a semblance of a normal life. Of course, there's still, paranoia and still worry about what happened to her in the past and stuff like that. But the overall just kind of sculpt of the final girl is still a person who relatively survives with, minimal damage or nothing that can't like properly heal. Here, you have a final girl that's just maimed for life, is embarrassed to go out in public, just is horrifically disfigured, and is basically living a life that she no longer wants because she would just be much more happy to be dead than it would be to be alive when it came to this one. So, Devil, my friend, where do we like this movie when it comes to rankings and stuff like that? So before we go into its competitor, how do you like this movie, when it comes to an overall ranking for the obituaries?
I mean, for me personally, like I said, I give this movie a high regards, you know what I mean? I mean, even before it became, I guess, a cliche of a horror movie where, now there's so much of the big fandom. Like you said, you can go out to any of your Hot Topics and Spencer's and your stores like that and buy Terrifier, Terrifier and Art the Clown merchandise, which, I'm not against anybody wanting to merchandise their stuff. I mean, I'm all for merchandising, whoring yourself. So it's all cool. But yeah, like before all that became big, like I said, we were huge fans of Terrifier, huge fans of All Hallows Eve and stuff like that, huge fans of Damien. But yeah, so I mean, for this one, I definitely, like I said, I always gave it a huge high praise because it's such a good return to old school practical movies. It's all practical effects, it's all special effects, it's all done, DIY and all that kind of stuff that independent, horror directors and stuff like that, of people who I've always admired, even going into these big, huge, horror, huge directors now that are super big, but like Sam Raimi and stuff like that, when, when they first started off, they started off with these kind of low budget horror films. Peter Jackson, if I can, Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson, multi-gazillion dollar movie, started off with Brain Dead and all that kind of stuff like that. I love the fact that, they bring back, that Damien was bringing back this old school kind of like revival of like, do it yourself kind of horror films. So like I said, I've always gave this one a high praise. So for me, this one is an 8.
Absolutely, brother. No, I'm definitely with you on that one. I like this movie quite a bit. It's so good. It's solid. I'll match your 8 when it comes to that. It's just got so much of an interesting, unique quality to it where normally you would think that kind of lower budget, grainy design would be detrimental to the film. But when it comes to the actual purpose of the movie, the point, for lack of a better term, it's trying to get across, it just kind of fits that. There's certain movies where a more polished look isn't exactly proper when it comes to that movie. And that's what I actually really like about the original Terrifier movie, is that when you get to that grainy, just sick, worrisome design, it's so much more better as that low budget visual, like you said before, Blair Witch style, that really adds to like the storytelling, where bright colors and a certain amount of polish, doesn't necessarily always work. So I'll definitely meet you on that one, my friend. So there, Fangs, we are going to give Terrifier from 2016, we are going to give that an 8 on the obituaries. And now, as we continue in, we're going to move to its showdown competitor in very classic Halloween style, in Trick or Treat.
I personally myself am a big fan of this movie. I always have been. I love the Sam character, and I just, speaking of, like, similar to Terrifier, also it's another character that's definitely been able to, capitalize on, like, its merch memorabilia appeal, because the Sam character is very highly merchandised. It's very, very popular. Everybody pretty much knows the character, even if you haven't seen the movie, which is actually something very, very interesting. Where I feel like with the Art the Clown stuff, you have to be a little bit more familiar with the movie to really understand a lot of the stuff that it gets put out. Where you're seeing things like, Art Krispies, or like certain bloody scenes, or T-shirts with art, almost Silence of the Lambs style, wearing like a female body, like skin suit kind of a thing. Like, so much when it comes to that kind of stuff that you have to kind of know the context for it to make any sense whatsoever. Where I feel that Sam has kind of taken on a little bit of life of his own as a actual standalone character, where you know that to be Sam. You know he's from this movie Trick or Treat, even if you haven't seen the movie. But similar to how we began with Art the Clown, with how his origin started, Trick or Treat is an anthology movie. I'm a big fan of anthology movies, but it takes place on Halloween with a series of little movies that, one of the things I really like about it is they do legitimately all tie in together. I mean, we're both big fans of Creepshow. We love all that kind of stuff. And, like, anthology movies are great. And you can have one movie that tells you 3 to 5 stories. And that's super duper cool. And that's all well and good. But I've always loved Trick or Treat for the fact that all of the stories circle back around in one way or another to connect with an overall big picture.
Oh yeah. It's such a cool. I love the whole, the whole anthology, part aspect of the movie, just because I've, we're huge fans of, like, Tales from the Dark Side and Creepshow and stuff like that. Where this one I think is a little bit cooler, just because it's an anthology of three of within a movie, but all of them kind of have ties in with each other. It's all reoccurring characters that you see in this story is still are characters in another story. It's just something maybe hasn't happened to them yet at that time, or maybe this one's in the future, this one's later on, or it always kind of, and then it kind of circles back. So I always like that part of the anthology, as far as when it comes to Trick or Treat, just because it's such a cool anthology, because it's technically 3 stories within one story, dealing with the characters that are characters in each one of the stories. It's just that in their particular story, they're the main characters, and maybe in another story, they're like a side story or side character or stuff like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it starts off basically with this, character, this couple coming back from, a Halloween party and stuff, and they're kind of run down. Like, the wife just kind of wants to put Halloween away and go to bed and relax, and she wants to get everything done now. The husband's a little bit more interested in getting a little on Halloween night, and he's trying to talk her into that. And she's like, well, this is the problem. If we don't clean it up tonight, you're going to go to bed, you're going to sleep the day away, then you're going to play video games, and I'm still going to have to do it all myself. So they kind of, like, are initially, just kind of trying to negotiate. Okay, fine, give me a second and I'll get some of this stuff put away, and then we'll go upstairs and we'll have some fun, which is all that he really wanted out of the deal. And then I love the kind of Michael Myers-ish feel of when she's breaking down her yard, pulling down the sheets, very, like, classic Halloween style, with Michael hiding in the bushes or hiding behind the sheets. Very, very cool, just to have that, that final, like, pull down of her being attacked by Sam's character. And I love the way that they tie certain things in later to certain scenes, which we'll get into in a bit. But, Sam's, attacking her, and takes, his good old broken, lollipop and right across the throat, and it is a wrap on her. And then he eventually wakes up in the bed with, like, the snowstorm on his screen, wondering, like, where his wife is. And he's walking around, like, looking for and trying to find her, just to find out that she's on display under one of those sheets, just completely, like barbed wire, Halloween lighted up, almost crucifixion style, with Sam's lollipop just jammed in her mouth.
Yeah, and I like the whole thing before she gets killed, before they started to talk about what getting some nookie and taking it down. I love the fact that she was like, we needed to get we need to get rid of this stuff. We need to tear down. Halloween's over, and he was like, it's bad luck to blow out your pumpkin before Halloween is technically over. And she's like, whatever. And then you know in cool old fashion, yeah, that came back to bite her in the ass because
Yep.
maybe if she would have left the pumpkin alone, she might have survived. But nope. It's like that's what I love about that. It's that old school movie about the whole Halloween, just like the backstory of the true Halloween story where we wear costumes and stuff like that to kind of get yourself into the crowd of the dead, because the dead can come out, and if you're wearing a costume you can kind of blend in, and the bad guys and the monsters and the ghost can't come and get you. And that where it's got, that's why you start doing that. That's why you light the lights and the pumpkins. And I love it how it has a lot of that like historical stuff to it in this movie as well. And then like I said, in the other story, it's got a huge thing that, like, while we were growing up as kids, one of the stories was, your mom and your dad told you, don't, we were taking candy from strangers all the time, which I always thought was kind of funny in Halloween because you're trusting. But there was always this big thing about checking your candy, because at the time there had been places where people were putting razor blades and stuff like that in the candy, which leads into one of the other stories of the anthology with the teacher and him putting in the candy, which I thought was a cool aspect for this, because in this movie, you've got the candy that's being eaten that is either poisonous or has the razor blades in it. But when they were making this movie, they couldn't use any actual franchise like candy. Like they couldn't get Hershey or that, because of the fact that they were talking about putting razor blades and stuff in it. And none of the chocolate companies were like, yeah, no, we don't want that. We don't want our stuff being associated with that kind of stuff, even though in real life those kind of candies have been used, but they just didn't want that kind of light, so they had to go out and make their own kind of candy, which was pretty cool as far as that part of it.
Yeah, no, which I always thought was like super duper cool, and it also does kind of work with that same type of merchandising thing that we talked about, because you actually can buy those actual candy bars. The tally actually do exist, which I think is really really cool. But no, I love it because, like, yeah, that's the first story that they get into, but it's also got a cool little twist before you even really get into other linking stuff, where you've got the principal or the teacher who just hates kids, and he's like, you know what, he busts one of his students, like the local fat kid or whatever, eating too much of the candy, not just taking one or two and going on your way. And so he's sitting him down, kind of lecturing him, and then all of a sudden he's throwing it all up and bleeding from the mouth, and subsequently dies from the poison candy that the teacher did to him. And then he's dragging him out to the back to bury him in his yard, and there's already another body of what you could assume is a kid in the ground already, potentially, because it's never really said whether it is or isn't a kid. But he throws the second body in the pit. He's trying to bury it, but at the same time he keeps getting distracted, and his hyperparanoia is stepping in. And so he's like, geez, the dog from the neighbor is barking at him. And then the angry neighbor just starts yelling at him. He's like, oh, you're making too much noise. Or what's that smell? Like, he's like, I think it's my septic tank. And he's like, oh, man, I have to suffer through that. Can't we do something about it? He's like, well, I'm kind of trying. All right, grr. And he goes back into his house. And then he's trying to get the work done, and his his son's like, Dad, I'm back from trick-or-treating. And, he's like, all right, cool. He's like, will you help me carve this jack-o'-lantern? He's like, yeah, no sweat. Let me finish what I'm doing. Okay, well, don't forget. Okay, I won't forget. Then he, like, keeps interrupting him, and you could see he's, like, upsetting his dad to where you can't help but feel like he's getting mad at his son. And eventually he's left enough alone to be able to finish the burying in the grave, plants a tree, which I thought was hilarious, and starts watering the tree so that the tree will get, will start to grow on top of the bodies, and then goes into what you feel is like help his, son carve a jack-o'-lantern. But while he's leading him down to the basement, he's all like, Sinister style, like, yeah, let's go down to the basement to do this. And grabs a knife and to take down there. And then he's, talking to his son, and his son's all excited to work on this jack-o'-lantern. And then, you see him come down with that one sharp blow with that knife at what you could only assume at the time was the head of his son.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. Then all of a sudden, its big reveal is that it's the fat kid's head, and he's teaching his son how to carve a human head into a jack-o'-lantern, which I think is really cool. I think it's funny that the fat kid that's in that movie that they killed is the bad kid, the kid from Bad Santa, which I thought was pretty awesome. I love the fact that that kid is so annoying. You feel bad for that dad, while he's trying to bury this freaking body. That little kid's just being so annoying. Dad, I'm in the yard. Hey, what are you doing, Dad? And obviously when you're trying to bury a dead body, as we both know, you kind of want to do that, without somebody going, hey, and then 2 seconds later, oh yeah, hey, I forgot to tell you this, and then comes back, oh yeah, I'm gonna tell you this, and it's just like, oh my god, man, like shut that kid up. And then like you said, it's pretty cool too, because that, like we were talking earlier with that the anthology of these movies all being kind of interspliced with each other and stuff. While he's getting ready to go back into the house after he buries the tree, he sees his neighbor yelling his name, and he's getting what looks to seem to be attacked, but you can't really tell. And he's just like, fuck that neighbor. And then, like I said, with the anthology, eventually you find out, later on what happened with him. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. You know what I mean? It's just like the whole story with with him doing the jack-o'-lantern with his son and stuff like that, and the very serial killer. Like I said, it just reminds you, like you said, to watch out for the candy, because you never know who's whose candy you're getting. You don't know whether or not it's good or bad. But yeah, it's like, yeah, that whole entire time, like I said, with the little kid, that was always my favorite part of that scene, because you were just like, you felt the dad's pain. You're like, oh my god, shut that fucking kid up, man. I'm just trying to bury this body before all these people see me. I'm like, I always love that scene.
Oh, absolutely. And then it kind of like, segues into, the next segment, which is kind of basically about this, like, group of friends who are, it's kind of interesting on this one, because it's kind of two dual stories that are kind of going back and forth a little bit, where you've got this group of kids who are going around collecting jack-o'-lanterns, and you don't really know why at first. You just, they're not there to smash them. They're just like collecting jack-o'-lanterns for this like purpose. And then at the same time, you're seeing this like more grown-up group of friends who are just going out to like the local party to like have a good time and just do what teenagers and early 20-year-olds do and stuff. And it made me laugh too, because like at one point they're just walking in the crowd and they bump into the couple that you saw at the very beginning of the movie, because the guy's dressed like a knight and his wife's dressed like a robot, and they just kind of bump into him just like people in the crowd. You don't look at it any other way. You're just kind of like, oh, bunk, oh, ran into that person, oh, continue on your way. And it's morphs into like their story, where it's basically these kids just kind of going out, they're really just kind of doing their thing. And then at the time, because you've got the one girl who like, they keep talking to her in a way like they really just want her to get hooked up and lose her virginity. And we know that Sookie Stackhouse doesn't do that. because the character does happen to be played by True Blood's Anna Paquin. But they're talking about, her getting her, first time. And it's like, well, I want it to be special. And they're like, oh my God, you're one of them and all that kind of stuff. And there's this like subsequent like vampire, which I can always appreciate, moving around, like biting people's necks, like, killing people, at least at the time, what looks to be like killing people and stuff like that. And he ends up turning his eyes onto Sookie and wants to get like, involved in like that. He's like, oh, beautiful girls, for me to scare, for me to torture, and for me to have some of that sweet, nectar and all that kind of great stuff. Just all of a sudden, this dude just gets smoked, and he just falls from the sky into this hole, like just lands with a thud in this field. And that's where the twist comes in, where the whole time it was never about, virginity. It was all about sacrificing your first human. And as far as I'm concerned, as much as it pains me to ever see a member of my kind go down, fuck this asshole. That dude was a poser as they pulled out his plastic fangs.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, and before you get into that big reveal, they're all like dressing in their costumes and stuff like that, and they all come out with like the fairy tale kind of like slutty outfits and stuff. But I always love about that part of that movie too is while they're getting dressed, you see this little boy, which is true to my heart because this was me as a little boy, little devil boy, going and watching the girls get dressed and put on their clothes and taking off their clothes, which I always thought was funny because it's a sort of an Easter egg that a lot of people don't know, is the little boy who's watching them get dressed is actually Quinn Lord, who plays Sam in the movie. It's just him without, him as who he was before, obviously not in the Sam character. So a lot of people like. So it's funny, you see like this little dude checking him out. But yeah, I liked it. I liked the fact that it was like, you had this vampire stalking her, and you're like, oh man, this guy's gonna kill this woman and stuff like that. And then it's kind of like turn around, and all of a sudden, he's in this field, and all of a sudden, they realize that he's not really a real vampire, and they're having this sacrificial orgy of them turning into werewolves and killing them. And then when you reveal who the vampire was, lo and behold, it was the teacher from the episode where he was just previous that we talked about with the carving the pumpkin head and killing the kid for his candy and stuff like that. So he obviously he was a killer, and that he was just using, Halloween as a guise to be able to kill people. And ultimately he stalked the wrong person, and, Little Red Riding Hood, which was the outfit that she was wearing, was kind of like that little, like, last laugh, like, oh, she's like, I feel stupid wearing this. And then it's like, you're like, okay, wait, all the other girls are wearing stupid outfits too. And then all of a sudden you realize, yeah, it's kind of funny that she's wearing this Little Red Riding Hood outfit when they're all packs of, from pack of werewolves.
Yep. No, absolutely. And then it again segues into the third story, which is kind of a throwback to the previous story, as the young kids collecting the pumpkins have recollected, and they meet up with their like fourth member, because they're trick or treating, but also at the same time asking like, hey, can we have one of your pumpkins and take it and dickhead teacher principal vampire guy is like, as long as you're not going to just go smash it. And they're like, no, we really just want to take it and, for like a display or whatever. And he's like, okay, yeah, sure, no problem. So they come across their friend, and they haven't had a whole lot of success. They've only been able to get like one. And, they meet up with their friend who's been able to get like 3. And they're like, 3? That's not enough. He's like, well, I'm trying my best. All the other assholes have gone out and smashed all the pumpkins around this area. So it's really difficult. But they're able to collect the pumpkins that they need, and they end up going into this little pitted area where it turns into ghost story time, which I always think is kind of cool when you do it right, and you're able to like splice kind of ghost story time into an anthology movie where it's almost kind of like you get a story for free as long as you like do it right, where it just doesn't seem like, the bathroom song of a rock concert where you're like, oh God, now they're going into something else. I don't want to go into something else. But I really like the way they're doing it, where they're basically talking about the story of a whole school bus of people and a school bus of kids that are all just basically little shitbags, and their parents just don't want them around anymore, just kind of over their bullshit. And they bribe the bus driver to just kill them all. And and so he ties them all up. He's going to dispose of them all. And one of the kids gets out and kind of attacks the bus driver and attacks and in the struggle they end up driving the bus off a cliff into a gorge, which is where the story is being taken place. And everybody dies except the bus driver. But then he just goes into hiding, and nobody ever hears from him again. And you just don't know what he's doing. He's just like, fuck, I need to get out of Dodge. This is definitely not a good thing. So she's telling the story of the sacrificed kids, which was the whole purpose of the 8 pumpkins for each child, so they can be thrown into the water as like a respectable offering.
Yeah. That's like, I like it too, because it's with that story, it's kind of reminds you of, like, when they're telling you the story of these kids, they're wearing like what was like your traditional like old school like these horror masks, you know what I mean? Like one's dressed up as a vampire and the other one stuff like that. It was those old, like, cheap, timey, old costumes that I love. Yeah. And then like I said, you go into the story where the girl is telling everybody the story about these people, and this is where they're going to go down to, where supposedly they are at. And, it's kind of like a spooky story. And they end up getting the other pumpkins from a girl who is, borderline, I would say, in like on the on the autistic spectrum area. So she's very knowledgeable about stuff. You can tell she's still very timid, and she's on that spectrum. And so, the whole story is, they're going down and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And she finally goes out and she sees those kids running, and then she sees somebody get killed, and all of a sudden she's getting scared, and she ends up like hurting herself, falling back, trying to get away, realizing that this was just a prank, that these kids were playing an old school prank on her about the story. And even, once they figure that out, it was a prank and all that, even the one kid who was in the prank was like, so all this was prank, and we know we've set up all this stuff, but where did that school bus come from? Like, where did that come from? Then all of a sudden, what happens is all of a sudden the real ghosts and the real kids who got killed in the story come back and go after those kids. And it's kind of like a beware where you're at kind of says story, where it's like, yeah, now all these kids are getting their getting whacked and killed.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. It's also one of those things as well where it's like, look, be careful who you pick on as well. It's also a little bit of an anti-bullying message, because the Spectrum girl Rhonda, she sees all these ghosts coming out to kill and murder these children. And Sam, of course, is there just kind of witnessing it, and Rhonda sees him, and Sam sees her, and she just kind of looks at him and just gives him that little nod of like approval, like,
yep, he walks one way, she walks the other way.
Yep, I see you, I appreciate you, respect. And then she just goes about her business, and that's the that's the end of that, where it's like, what, don't, you can make fun of the kid that you think is on the spectrum, or the kid that you just feel is way too into Halloween, but sometimes they know a little bit more than you think they do, and there's always a way for things to come back and bite you.
Yeah. And then speaking of things that come back and bite you, that's how the movie sort of ends. All of a sudden, you have it goes back in the story where the neighbor, when the dude was trying to bury his body and the kid was being annoying and the dog and stuff like that, and you had that neighbor across the street, it goes into his side of the story where, he's on the other side, and you see him saying all the stuff that he said, and he goes back into the house, and then all of a sudden, he hears the knock at the door, and then there, Sam comes after him, and people are trying to kill him, and you realize that he was actually the bus driver that survived, and killing these kids, and goes and has his little battle with Sam a little bit, and gets messed up, and survives it, blows Sam away with a shotgun, which I always liked because his guts and blood and all that was basically like the inside of a pumpkin, the pumpkin filling with all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was kind of cool. You got to see a quick second of his face underneath the mask, which was very like kind of ghoulish, sort of like pumpkin head kind of like thing in his head. And yeah, and then he thinks it's all over, and he hears a knock on the door, and all of a sudden it's the little kids. They're like, "Hey man, you killed us. Now we're gonna kill you."
Yep. And that's the thing I also thought was super cool too, was like, because ultimately Sam was just kind of like, frankly, he's just more or less getting a piece of a guy who's being like mean to kids on Halloween. I feel like that's a little bit more, while he's still getting his revenge on, the person that it turns out was the bus driver that went into hiding. It seemed the fight itself was a little bit more about, just keeping someone in line for respect on Halloween kind of a thing. Because that's what leads it back to almost the pre-ending of the movie where, Sam's, the old guy survives. Sam's left the house. He's like, you know what? Okay, I get it. I'm going to take my lollipop and I'm going to leave. Because he, at one point takes a bite out of it to use it as a weapon in traditional Sam style to make it this really jagged, sharp, like crescent moon. And he gets, but they kind of come to this whatever agreement you want to call it, whether it's, Peter Griffin giant chicken style, where it's just the end of the fight and they've just decided it's the end of the fight. Or maybe even something a little deeper where maybe Sam knows something that he doesn't, where he's not fully about the dirty work. And he leaves the house, and as he's simply standing there minding his own business is when the original married couple comes home, and that's where Sam witnesses the husband warning the wife, well, it's not good to blow out the jack-o'-lanterns early. It's disrespectful. And she's like, oh, it's whatever. That's just tales. Like, fuck Halloween or whatever. It's the end of the night. Blows it out. And that's, when Sam looks back and he's like, all right, she asked for it. And so it was cool to see that fight with the old man, the bus driver, was actually how his lollipop became what it was to kill her with at the beginning of the movie. And then just like you said, he thinks it's all over with, and he's bandaged himself up, and he's trying to be respectful of Halloween. So he's giving candy to kids, and then he gets another knock at the door. He's like, well, let me give these kids new candy, just to realize that he's now been found by all the kids that he murdered. And that's how it ends.
Yeah.
Pumpkin extinguished. So when it comes to this movie, when it comes to the Obituaries, brother, to be honest, this has always been one of my favorite Halloween movies. It honestly is one of my favorite just movies in general when it comes to the genre. I love anthology movies, but this has always been very high, if not my favorite anthology movie, because of the fact that they all do tie in very seamlessly. And I think it's really, really good. And while I do think that this movie is much more polished than Terrifier, which we did say was actually part of Terrifier's charm, I think it worked properly for this movie, where you actually needed, though, a little bit more of that polished aspect to it, where, like, Sam's candy cane having a little bit more definition makes sense, seeing that it's more the equivalent of almost like jagged broken glass than, just a dark lollipop with a bite out of it. Where if anybody, who's had lollipops, when they were young and stuff like that, knows that sometimes if you suck on them or eat them in like funny ways, you can actually put sharp edges on them and stuff like that. So it does work, but I did love the money spent on certain definition for scenes to make things just have more clarity to them. But I've always loved this movie. I love the character. I have Sam's all over, all over my castle, and I just think he's a great character. And I do love the fact that he's kind of got his own kind of standalone love when it comes to that. But I've always considered this movie to be pretty high up there, man. And I give it an 8 as well. I've always just really enjoyed the execution. I think it's done well. And while I love anthology movies like Creepshow, and I will ride or die with them, I love the fact and respect the fact that Creepshow was simply designed comic book style of 3 to 4 separate movies, opposed to 3 to 4 separate stories, as opposed to Trick or Treat, which is still 3 to 4 separate stories, but they all tie in and have something to say about the one that preceded it.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you on that. It's like, like I said, I love the fact that there's, you have the big stars in this movie, and then you have some people who aren't as big, and it's a cool movie, and it's one of those ones that have gotten progressively more and more and more love as the years go. Like I said, Sam is considered an icon. Like I said, you can go to any Halloween store and buy Trick or Treat stuff and stuff like that. So I love the fact that that character. I love the fact that as of right now, they've still never done any other sequels or continuations with this story now like that. So I like the fact that it's kind of like a standalone only for as long as it's been. And like you said, yeah, it's a staple of anybody who is into not even just horror films, just Halloween movies in general, and or movies like you said, the anthology and stuff like that. So I love the fact that it's just a cool movie. I love the fact that how everything intertwines and intersplices with each other. Like you said, the end of that movie is kind of sort of the beginning of the movie, and then this part's over here and that part's over there, but they all kind of intertwine with each other. Because, like I said, you see the guy kill kill the kid and it's carving the pumpkin, the teacher, and then all of a sudden later on you see that he died, but then it's like, well, how did he die if he's already alive? So it's like, I like the whole, where they intersplice and you don't know exactly where in the movie you are as far as like the timeline,
Yeah.
but everything is within that, you notice that it's all within the same day. It's that same, it's all on Halloween day. So Halloween night. So yeah, I love it. Like I said, and I agree with you too when it comes to the rating. I mean, Trick or Treat's up there as like one of the best, movies just in general in the genre. So I agree with you with that 8.0 as far as Trick or Treat.
Nice. I'm definitely stoked for that. And yes, as you can imagine there, Fangs, it is definitely, when it comes to Halloween, there's a lot of nuances and stuff like that. But Devil, my friend, I gotta address something real quick. I feel like I gotta call you out on something though, real quick. I'm noticing a little something. You have that look in your eyes, and I know you better than anybody else does, you little devil. And why do I feel like you're not willing to play fair? Why do I feel like you might have something up your sleeve?
Oh yeah, well here on the Vampire and Devil podcast, we never like when movies are even. We have no half points. We don't say okay we have ties or anything like that. And like we said, Terrifier 1 got an 8.0 as a collective between the two of us, and Trick or Treat got a 8.0 out of collectively between the two of us. So you're thinking, what should we do? Well, just like my buddy Art the Clown says, or doesn't say, because like I said, he's a mute motherfucker. He doesn't play very, very fairly. And as much as he might appreciate what Sam does and how Sam kills, he wants to be the ultimate Halloween badass. So he's bringing in a tag team partner. He's bringing in Art the Clown on Terrifier 2, motherfuckers.
So that's the way it's going to be.
Oh yeah, we're gonna tag team little Sammy with a little art to art sandwich.
Well, let's see how Sam does as we talk a little bit about Terrifier 2. Now, what I will say about Terrifier 2 is the brutality is definitely much higher in the second Terrifier movie. However, the polish of the actual movie is actually much higher as well, which is an interesting direction. And again, when you've got more money to play with, there's certain things that you get. There's certain gifts that you kind of get in exchange for having some more money and stuff. But that was definitely something I found particularly interesting when it came to Terrifier 2. So when it comes to Terrifier 2, it opens up with Art the Clown, as usual, being Art the Clown, but it's coming out of the closing of the original movie, where he's in the morgue, half his head just blown the hell off, and then gets up, completely lays everybody out and murders all the morticians, and then just feels like he needs to get some laundry done. But that leads to a new character.
Yeah. I love that. I love the fact, like you said, it continues on exactly right into that, from the first one right into the second one where you find out, he didn't actually die and stuff like that. And I love that. Yeah, he goes out and he's got to, do some laundry. And, obviously, as we all know, from watching this movie, Art does not wear anything under his clown outfit. So, he's got to wash those whites, which, I mean, makes kind of no sense to me because, Art the Clown's going to get a bloody again anyway. But I guess maybe, he's got OCD and he needs to make sure those whites are whites. And like you said, he's just chilling, minding his own business, and we get a new character, which is kind of like I don't know, a daughter or a spawn of Art the Clown, where you see the little girl with the pigtails, and she's just as crazy and mild, weird, and violent and disgusting as Art the Clown is. He basically is like just a little kid version of him.
Yep, we get the little female girl, the pale girl, which it's funny too because it's never fully explained ever. And the thing that's so interesting to me, I've always equivalated the pale girl to Art the Clown as what's his name? The Great Gazoo from the Flintstones, where he/she is clearly seen by the main person, but it's never really explained if it's seen by somebody else. Well, yes, there is at least curiosities when it comes to a character we'll get more in depth with a little bit later in Jonathan, where if the pale girl can be seen or not. There is a possibility that she can in certain scenes or in certain ways, but not necessarily because she's also not seen without Art as well. So that's the other thing that's very, very interesting. But anyway, after you get through that scene of laundromat and the death of a victim courtesy of a mop handle, you get introduced to really the main people of the stories, which is Jonathan and Sierra's family, which is basically a very traditional family. It's leading into Halloween. Sierra wants to be this, her late father was like an illustrator or an author or a comic book writer or something, and, had created this kind of, Valkyrian character. And Sierra really wanted to be that for Halloween, so she's been creating this outfit based off her daddy's character, versus Jonathan, who's like a little like nerdy looking, metal kid who is really just into the story of the Mainsfield killer, which is Art the Clown, and he wants to be Art the Clown for Halloween, despite the fact that it's kind of in bad taste, because this does take place in the same few days of at least you would think of the original movie taking place, at least as far as the the killing of the morticians leading into this new story. There's no real necessarily hear or say on that. I personally do think, as it's kind of explained, because it's
it's more about that year later kind of a thing.
Yeah, they do say a year
Because they
later.
do mention the newspaper articles and stuff like that, where again they go back in time to immediately touch base on the original killings when he's got a gunshot wound to his head, is when it looks like it moves directly into the next day. The problem is they're all getting ready for Halloween like 3 days later, and it's like, wait, that doesn't even really work. But then again, the infatuation of Jonathan's character with Art the Clown is what puts it into, retrospect that this is a year later after all of those killings and whatnot. But that's how you start getting introduced to, the family. They've got a relatively protective mother who doesn't believe in Jonathan portraying Art the Clown and doesn't really love the rebellious nature of, her daughter. And pretty much does kind of come across as an alcoholic, most likely due to the death of her husband.
Yeah, and like it goes into, with when you go into Sierra's character and her, her having these connections that you find out later on, she ends up like having nightmares, and which leads into probably one of my favorite parts of the whole movie is the Art the Clown kind of like terror cafe, where this is like sort of like a
Clown Cafe.
Yeah, the Clown Cafe kind of reminds me of like the old school like 80s Nickelodeon TV shows with the kids all hanging out, and you have a girl singing about the songs, and it's all Art the Clown related, and they're all like singing their like campfire kind of songs and stuff like that while they're eating the Art the Clown crispy cereal that has razor blades in the cereal, and the commercials are very like that just remind me of those old like 80s commercials for like cereal and stuff like that. And like I said, just this whole like dream sequence that she's having is just one of my favorite things ever, like I said, because it's just like, they're eating crazy stuff and they all have gifts, and then all of a sudden, Art the Clown comes out, and like we said in the original Terrifier that, Art the Clown loves playing with all kinds of weapons. He brings out a Tommy gun out of nowhere and just starts Tommy gunning the fuck out of everybody.
Just Dillinger style, dude. Just completely taking people out, Bonnie and Clyde style.
Yeah, I just love it. Yeah, that's like I said, just that whole sequence of like the song that she's singing. The kids are all singing along to the songs, and while they're like half dying and eating weird things, and then like I said, then while she's having this dream, fire happens, and there's a real fire in her house, and her wings that she was working on forever get put in there, so she's got to go out to find a new pair of wings because it's not enough time within Halloween with being a day or the next day to be able to make these wings as good as she was going to do. So she just goes to her local Spirit Halloween store, which is not really a Spirit Halloween store. This looks like it's just like an all-the-time Halloween costume shop, which was pretty cool though. And then yeah, you kind of get into what is almost now considered the iconic Art the Clown signature look, where he's in there and he's just trying on different glasses, and he tries on the eyeball ones and he's going, and his eyeballs are flying out, but he puts on the sunglasses with the sunflowers and gives the peace sign, and they made that into a Funko Pop now, and anybody who dresses up as Art the Clown now, it's cosplay, always has those glasses on. So it's just a fun, again, like the whole experience when he's inside the Halloween shop. It just reminds you of like that greatness of David and his ability to mime and to play this character very well, where it's creepy and scary yet still like that comical side of it, but again, not saying one word. And then she goes away, she buys her stuff. You got the guy in the shop that was being a dick, the owner, the kid working the shop, and he ends up killing him. And then my favorite part of the whole entire movie, when it comes to that, is this mom and little kid come in the shop and go, oh, or try to go in the shop and it's closed, and they see Art the Clown with a head and think it's an animatronic the whole entire time.
No, for sure. And it's funny too with those sunflower glasses, bro. I've been to cons and seen fans taking those glasses to get them autographed by the cast, and I'm like, that is commitment, and that is unique. And you're lucky that you're not driving some of these cats crazy, because it's literally watching people like doing teeny tiny versions of their autographs, because they're like the same size as like regular like sunglasses, obviously with a little bit more space because of the pedals. But it's really crazy when it comes to that. But no, absolutely. And you know, it's also part of that quiet comedy as well, because at one point when all he's trying to do is buy this little horn, this little clown horn, and he's driving the guy crazy because he's taking forever and the guy wants to close up and go home. It's part of that comedy too, where he's like digging around in his bag. The guy's getting annoyed because he's like, great, just another freaking guy wasting my time who has no money. And then all of a sudden you see him pull out like this little crumpled dollar, another little crumpled $5, like little bloody coins, and he's putting them on the table. And the guy's like, oh my God, this is that guy who's going to pay for this thing fully in change. Which ends up then leading to his demise when he tries to challenge Art the Clown. But yeah, it continues on with, you know, Sierra's growing paranoia that Art the Clown is following her, that he's really back in town, while it's also splicing with Jonathan's story of this kind of just uncertain kid, young kid, missing his dad, trying to go through school, but also starting to see things. And that was the thing that kind of like precursed earlier, where his friends find like a dead raccoon, and they're like, yo, Jonathan, check out this, you know, dead raccoon and stuff. And he's like, oh man, that's really crazy and whatnot. And they're, you know, trying to scare the girls in school with it and stuff. And they end up getting busted by their teacher from none other than Sleepaway Camp's Felissa Rose. And, you know, she's like, oh my God, that's disgusting. You know, like, go to class, go back inside. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? And then while walking through the school to, you know, try to, you know, go to the bathroom or whatever, just get some time outside of class, is when he stumbles across Art the Clown and the Pale Girl playing with that dead animal right in the school. And that's the part I always found very interesting, where it's like, well, it pretty clearly does show that, like, Art being such a focal point can most likely be seen by anybody who wants to clearly see him. But it still makes it a little curious on whether or not the Pale Girl is quite as easily seen by the general populace, or only by specific people that they want to know that she's around. Which is one of the reasons why they've never really explained, you know, traditionally, you know, is she an imaginary friend? Is she maybe a, you know, dead, you know, maybe a stillborn child from Art's non-serial killer life, or all that kind of stuff? You know, and it never really gets explained and all that kind of stuff. But it's what kind of leads to it, because again, he's busted with this like roadkill, throwing it at teachers, and gets like suspended from school. When he's like, I didn't do it, Art the Clown did it. And then, of course, the teachers, his mother, nobody's going to believe him.
Yeah, it's like it made me wish that I had teachers like Felissa Rose back when I was in school, but that's a different subject. But yeah, to me, I don't know, because I agree with it, because obviously whenever you see Art the Clown meeting the Pale Girl the first time in the laundromat, you see him laughing and doing patty cake with him, and the person's watching Art just kind of playing patty cake with himself. So you kind of figured that her character is a imaginary person. And like you said, in that scene with the dead animal, yeah, Art's there and Pale's there, so you're not 100% sure whether or not he sees her completely. But then there's one scene where Art's not anywhere and she's in the van by herself, and he sees her in the van. So it's kind of like one of those ones where maybe normally she's a figment of Art's imagination, but because Jonathan's character is kind of going so much far in depth and being inept with Art the Clown and kind of becoming sort of one with Art the Clown, like almost on a like a compatible brainwave kind of function that maybe he can see her too, because he's kind of in Art's mindscape where you don't know whether or not this kid is like maybe going down the same kind of path as Art, like mentally or something like that. He's going to be a killer or like that. So maybe that's like, maybe it's drawn into that. But yeah, I like the fact that, you're not 100% sure who this character is. And like I said, to me, I think it's just a fun thing because, we all love, you know, Art the Clown and Terrifier in the first movie. And like I said, within the first 5 minutes, you're expecting, okay, yeah, Art the Clown's naked, he's cleaning his outfit. And then all of a sudden you find this character that's just as crazy and wild looking and just a cool aspect of it that like now like you kind of had Art the Clown become this big, huge entity in our world where people were dressing up as him and cosplaying and all the stuff you can buy. Now Pale Girl has sort of done that where you have people dressing up as her now, and you can find stuff from her. So I think it's kind of cool that she's kind of like the next big character in that. So it goes to kind of think, okay, maybe I wonder if there's going to be a third character in the one. I mean, I know, jumping a little bit ahead with Terrifier 3, we know that Art is going to be as Santa Claus, so we already know that is going to be an iconic thing that we're going to see throughout the years as far as like Funko Pops and people cosplaying and that kind of stuff. But I'm kind of curious on whether or not they're gonna have another character like Pill that's gonna be kind of like a new icon. But yeah, I liked her, like that. And like I said, continuing into the movie, she's going, Sierra's finally gets her wings. She got her outfit. She's going out to party, with her friends, and her friend slips a little bit of Molly in her drink, and she's having a good time. And then all of a sudden, Art kidnaps little Jonathan and calls her, and Pale Girl is pretending like she's talking like Jonathan because she can mime, and that's pretty much the only time you ever really hear either one of them speak in the movie, even though it's not really her speaking. It's just her kind of miming the voice of, kind of like when in Terminator 2 when the T-1000 was pretending to be the mom and was talking on the phone. It was, obviously it wasn't, T-2000's voice. It was the mom's voice, and then Robert Patrick's character lip singing or talking to it. So obviously with that, but it's still the first time you see any kind of vocal thing between the two of them. So I thought that was kind of neat.
Absolutely. And actually, real quick before we get into that kidnapping, because while the party's going on as well, with, Sierra just trying to cut loose with her friend and her friend's boyfriend, and, her friend drugging her just to get her to loosen up, is actually when 3 of the more iconic kills happen in the movie, which, again, Art the Clown, even stemming back to the previous movie and a half, is definitely no stranger to crazy sadistic kills. But he breaks into the house of Sierra's like bestie or other friend that they were going to meet up with, and just destroys this girl. I mean, he cuts her face up, he rips her face off, he breaks her arm, chops or slices her up with like one of those scalpel type needles, covers her in bleach and salt and cuts off her head. I mean, just completely leaves her looking like a hamburger, for her mom to discover. And her mom discovers, and you don't actually see the kill, but it segues into trick-or-treaters coming to her door and Art showing up, giving them candy out of the severed head of the mom for the girl he just tortured. And while Jonathan runs away to ultimately get kidnapped, not on purpose, and ultimately gets kidnapped by Art the Clown, it's because he gets into a fight with his mom, and he runs away. Mom thinks that he destroys her car, like TP and shaving creams up her car, so she's freaking out about, how she's going to punish Jonathan, just to have Art sitting in the car the whole time, and then blows her head off with a shotgun. And all of this happens within, the hours while they're in the party, that then, yes, segue right back to you, my friend, where the main climactic fight scene, I guess you would say, of the movie between, Sierra and Art happens at this carnival, which is interesting because Art, with Pale Girl's assistance, like you said, lure Sierra to go there. But then at the same time, there's little curiosities about this abandoned carnival that are a little hard to ignore.
Yeah. Like you were talking about with the with those kills. That's the cool thing about the first one. You have those iconic deaths and stuff like that, and how much this movie like stepped up as far as the gore factor. Expect the special effects are way even more awesome looking than the original one. You know what I mean? Because there's a little bit of more money they can pump into these special effects and stuff like that. Yeah, that scene where he's just like brutally killing that girl. It's this disgusting. Apparently, even like David said something about not really the scene itself being disgusting. He said, I guess like the ooey guts and stuff like that was really cold and sticky half the time. And that's kind of when you go into this where you get the first one with all the brutalness and the violence, and then the second one, and that's what's cool about this. The third one is that even the hyping of this one, where David said this one, there's something in this movie that even made him kind of sick and nauseous, which just goes, well, shit. What we saw in the first two movies is not brutal enough to make you kind of sick or gag or be like, oh God, that's disgusting. It just goes to make you think, oh, what the hell does Art the Clown and Damien have in store for what we're going to see as far as the graphicness of this. And that's what I said. That's what I love about these, with these movies being, independent and no studio, where, yeah, you're getting, you might not get the rating you're going to get. But then again, like I said, I feel with this one, that's, with the new one, it's going to be, it's going to be rated somewhat because of it being in the theater, but I like the fact that, yeah, he could still get away with doing pretty much whatever he wants to do because he's not really worrying about his film studio or producers or, other ones going, okay, yeah, but yeah, like you said, and he goes right into this carnival. And, like I said, this, it's supposed to be a year later, but this carnival seems like it was something that happened, years ago with somebody being killed in this carnival. And just like any horror movie or any just movie in general, you go to like Buffy the Vampire Slayer when she goes after Rutger Hauer's character in the abandoned carnival, or any of these movies where it's like, how are all these abandoned places always have electricity? All, like I said, even if this place has been abandoned, so let's say it has abandoned. Let's just say that the electricity doesn't work. So I mean, it does work in this movie, but we'll just say for a fact that it doesn't. Okay, this place is abandoned. This place hasn't been used in, let's say, like 5 to 10 years. So it's just this cool haunt that apparently is really, this carnival place. It's pretty easy to get into because their characters basically just drive right up to it and go right into it.
Yeah.
You're telling me that all that cool horror stuff and animatronics and props and all that stuff haven't been stolen by the local kids? Like, that'd be the first place that I would be going. I'd be like, yeah, if I go into the Halloween store and buying shit, I'm gonna go down to here to this carnival and take all this shit for free because there's no cops around the place. It's not barricaded or locked. Like, you have free range to all this cool shit.
Absolutely, man. And that's what ultimately leads to, like, the final idea, like, showdown between, like, Sierra, Jonathan, Art, where it's kind of an interesting climax to talk about because, again, it leads into a final scene in the credits that subsequently makes you wonder if there would have been a third, or if there's going to be a third, of which we know there is. And that's, the killing, so to speak, of Art, and the beheading of him just to be reborn
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty cool because, like I said, that whole the whole entire scene, right before Sierra, he kind of traps her in this water tank, which you find out the water tank that she's trapped in is sort of in this weird realm. I would imagine it's something like that because it's in the same set for where she saw the dreams of the clown cafe and all that kind of stuff. She
Yep.
kind of dies per se by drowning, and then I would assume that the spirit of her father or something, because with the sword and all that, kind of brings her back to life. She climbs out of what would be sort of like coming out of hell,
Yeah.
to a point where she comes out of that water, and like I said, yeah, and goes and beheads Art the Clown. And we all know that he's supernatural, so you're like, okay, well, I mean, they chop off his head. That usually is pretty good way to kill a supernatural character, is chopping off the head. So you're like, okay, yeah. And it kind of just ends, and
Yeah.
you're like, okay. And the credits start coming, and most of us that are huge Marvel fans know to usually stay after the credits because you're going to get those extra scenes. But when it comes to horror movies, you tend to usually, as soon as the credits come, most of us usually walk the fuck out because we're like, okay, there's not going to be anything extra, which was cool because in this movie it does. And it brings into a scene which is funny because when you're watching this movie, in the very beginning they show you the credits of everybody who is in the movie. It shows David, and it shows the characters that Sierra played, and it says Felissa Rose, and it mentions Chris Jericho, and
Yes.
you're like, fucking Chris Jericho's in this movie, oh sweet. And then you watch this movie and you're like, where the fuck was Chris Jericho? And then that comes into the scene where, when it cuts into the mid-credit scene where Art's getting, it's they're in a hospital, a mental hospital, and Chris Jericho is a worker there, and he's talking about his wife making these brain little foods and stuff like that, and he's saying stuff, and it goes into a throwback to the character in the second movie, which when the girl who originally got her face eaten by Art, she went on a killing spree and ate the TV reporter girl's face. And that girl now is all mangled and destroyed, and her face is like how the original girl was. And she's inside this sane asylum, and all of a sudden she has the immaculate exception of giving birth to Jesus Art, I guess, or something like that, and she has a Art baby head come out of her cooch.
Yep. And that's the thing that kind of like all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, by the way, you are still around. And that was just something I always found to be like super duper cool when it came to, how they did this movie and just the fact that, hey, we're still going to find a way to tie this in to back in the day with how it got started completely, which is actually something that I can really appreciate. And it's something that I really dig a lot, where it's like they are definitely committed to finding out ways to tie all of these movies in together in some way or another. And at least as of right now, it seems like, the mangled girl, the mangled character is going to be the main, antagonist for that.
Yeah. I think it's cool. It's like, it's like you said, like even some of the producers in this movie. I mean, you have the guys from Terrifier 1 that helped produce the movies, and they were, had a little small parts as actors in this movie, like, one Exterminator 1 or Terminator 2, this guy, and all this kind of stuff like that. It's pretty cool that, the same people who produce these movies, are producing, the Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 3. And now you have the one guy who produced that, Michael Levy. Now he's got a new movie called Stream coming out that just came out that's got a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's cool that these movies are, like I said, it's kind of, very family friendly, sort of like, family friendly as far as the production part of it, where it's like Kevin Smith, he works with a lot of the same people. It's a lot of the same people that are in these movies. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what the third one's going to bring.
Absolutely, man, for sure. So let's talk a little bit real quick about Terrifier 2 and the obituaries. How do you rank this one, my friend?
I mean, like I said, we already talked about how much we love Terrifier 1. And we've done segments before where we've talked about movies that are superior, or movies that we think are better than the original one. And us giving a Terrifier 1 an 8.0, you would think, yeah, it's not too much that's going to top an 8.0. But that's the crazy thing about Terrifier 2 is, as much as I love Terrifier 1, I think still Terrifier 2 is a way better movie. I think it's just not only just bloodier, I love the fact that it's just a fun movie. You have that clown cafe stuff. It's just a lot more story based in this one. There's way more kills in this movie. You have that more characters and more character development in this movie. The special effects are bumped up, the violence and the gore are bumped up, the quality of the film and the film itself is bumped up a lot more. So it's like, yeah, everything is kind of like, it's progressively gotten better and better. And like I said, even though, yeah, most time you usually give the OG ones the benefit of the doubt. Like I said, to me, in my opinion, I think Terrifier 2 blows Terrifier 1 out of the water. Not saying that Terrifier 1 is still not an amazing film, because obviously, like I said, we still love it, and we gave that an 8. So objectively, if I have to give Terrifier 1 an 8, I have to at least give Terrifier 2 a 9.0.
Got you, man. So I don't quite give it that high of 1 personally. So I definitely agree with you in all of those points. The funny thing with me is, while I do think that Terrifier 2 is superior to Terrifier 1, which is definitely uncommon for sequels, we've talked about that many times, it's just, yeah, there is so much more of that story when it comes to it. So I'll give it, the thing about me too is I liked the graininess of the original movie, because I thought it was just so solid for that character, because that character is so weird that it makes you also feel like in his brain he's not even going to have any real clarity in there. The fact that they had more money to play with to really up the gore and up the character and story arcs, I absolutely love that. But the fact that the movie overall actually was more polished is actually a slight detriment, in my opinion, when it comes to it. Nothing over the top, nothing that's not going to be like, oh my God, it's just such a good looking movie that it makes it terrible. Oh, hell no, I'm not saying that at all. It's just a really interesting dynamic when it comes to the two movies that really just show, when you've got a bigger budget, the options that you have. Like, the original Terrifier was for an incredibly small budget. The second Terrifier, I believe its budget was like $250,000, and it made like $10 million. I mean, it was some ridiculous turn on your investment, which is exactly what shows that the third one, no surprise, like you talked about, it was able to do scenes or really push the envelope to upset or queasify certain actors in the movie. So it definitely is something very possible with that. I can't quite go as far as a 9 when it comes to that one, but like, I give it an 8.5 solidly, because I do think it is better than the original, because of just the fact that this one, by, I guess, definition, is a real movie. It has a story to tell. The first movie didn't have a story to tell. There was no story to tell. It was literally just these three girls getting just butchered to death by this fucking crazy guy. There's no real story when it came to that. The second movie had a real story to it. But I just, with what did happen to the father? Is the father potentially Art the Clown? Like, that's something we didn't even really get into, but one of the cherished items that the children have is this like sketchbook, which is how Sierra knew to make this Valkyrian outfit look a certain way, and so on and so forth. There is some curiosities that maybe their father might have been a little bit closer to Art the Clown than the average person would think. So there is some possibilities there. We'll have to wait and see potentially how that plays out, because both those characters in Jonathan and Sierra are coming back for the new movie. So we'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, I can't totally go like super to a 9 personally, just because I love the grainy aspect of the original movie when it comes to the Art the Clown character. But I can't give it a less grade, and I can't give it an even grade because it's a proper movie. It's a real story with real arcs. It really tells you about people, which I definitely do appreciate. So I personally give it an 8.5. But again, we have a follow-up discussion to have for a moment. How do you like the swing to go? Do you think we should give it that 9 for superiority, or do you think just that little edge is enough?
Oh yeah, I mean I'm good with the 8.5. I think the 8.5 is good just because, like I said, I mean it's it's definitely like you said. I mean, I liked the grainier part of the original one, but I like the fact that this movie had a little bit more of a budget and you can do a little bit more. Because like I said, the original one you really only had per se 2 sets almost.
Yeah.
You had the diner and then that little machine shop area that had a couple little spots. But in general, yeah, where this one had a lot more different areas that you can discover in different places and different settings, and it was definitely like an upgrade as far as that. But yeah, I get what you were saying too. So I'm down with 8.5.
All right, so that's how it's going to be, Fangs. We're going to give Terrifier 2 an 8.5. So it looks like it's very, very difficult to overcome 2 Art the Clowns. Because while we do have Trick or Treat putting up its dukes and swinging his lollipop as Sam defends his turf, and an 8.0 competing with an 8.0 in Terrifier, it is very, very difficult to overcome a second Art the Clown coming at you as an 8.5. And while everybody knows that we don't do 0.25s and don't do 0.7s, that's not really the point of this particular Halloween episode. Because while I do believe that my beloved Sam has put up a very, very valiant fight and has a very, very quality movie to stand behind, it is very difficult to take out 2 Art the Clowns with a third Art the Clown coming with an overall slightly larger rating and a little more money to play with. So unfortunately, Fangs, while it does pain me a little bit inside, it does look like this one shall go to the devil as he turns Sam into a pumpkin pie.
Oh yeah, man! It's like everybody loves that pumpkin pie on Halloween, and as we know from watching Trick or Treat, he's got those inner pumpkin innards. So Sam might make a good pumpkin pie. I don't feel like Art the Clown would be very tasty, but then again, you never know. You never know. Those Art Krispies, and those razor blades did look a little bit delicious. So, like I said, I feel like Art would be, would bow down for a second to Sam, but then when Sam wasn't looking, he'd probably pull out that Tommy gun and start wailing at him. But the cool thing about Sam and Art the Clown is that those two are both supernatural, and as far as we know, neither one of them can die. So maybe eventually down the line, even though Art the Clown won this battle, maybe the two of them might go off and have a little tantrum of terror together.
Absolutely. So that's the way we're going to leave it on this one, Fangs. We are going to give the fatality to Trick or Treat. Victory to the devil, victory to the Terrifier series in our Halloween showdown of Terrifier and Terrifier 2 against Trick or Treat. Horns up. Fangs out.
All right, bloodsuckers and fangs alike, let's talk about a brand new Coffin Nails. 2020's Teenage Vampire. Look, it's a rom-com. It's like a girl chick flicky type movie. The title itself pretty much tells you what you're getting out of this movie. But look, it's basically about these two girls. They're best friends. They're really into bowling. They're not jocks or dorks or whatever. They're just kind of two friends that are really into bowling. One of the friends really, though, wants to be one of the popular girls. She just always fancies herself that way, and she wants to be a part of that clique. She ends up getting turned by, a vampire who goes by the name of Sin, who's the head of the cheerleading squad. The cheerleaders are basically a whole vampire clique. The thing about this movie is it's really not that much of a vampire movie. I mean, it is. There's a little bit of blood. There's some feeding and talk of feeding and like how to become a real, one of us type vampire. But it's really more of just like a cheerleading, like chick flick type thing. Just kids in high school. you've got the two nerdy boys who are like very weird science type of like nerdiness. It's actually kind of cute, that fancy themselves like vampire hunters, but they're just not very good at it. And then in typical fashion, you know, Sin, the head of the vampire cheerleaders, gets slayed. And, you know, the one girl doesn't turn back into a vampire, because it turns out, not really that it's that shocking, but it turns out that the coach is actually the head vampire. So all the cheerleaders get wiped out, and then the coach comes in and she's like, well, I can make you all immortal, of course, and I need to redo my cheerleading squad, and you can be one of us. But in an insanely awkward, weird ass way, she's impaled, not even through the heart, but from the back, through like her stomach and sternum, by like a silver bowling trophy to end up killing her. It's really weird. It's really bizarre. It just kind of is what it is. And then the two girls who like were nerds, that one girl wanted to be popular, the other girl wanted her not to be a vampire, end up kind of both becoming vampires and just kind of doing their own thing and being like the new popular girls. Really weird, very bizarre. Look, the movie's all right. The acting's fine. You know, the way it's shot is cool, and the storyline is solid enough. But it's not a vampire movie. It's a freaking cheerleading squad movie. So look, it's going to get a 5. That's the way it's going to be. 5 on the kill count for Teenage Vampire on Coffin Nails.
What's up? It's your boy the Devil here with another quick movie review. They don't always have to be horror movies, do they? Other movies do exist in the world, do they? Anyway, we're gonna talk about Godzilla and King Kong new movie. Have you checked it out yet? It's pretty cool. Godzilla fucking up all kinds of shit. King Kong with the mecha hand and all kinds of crazy stuff. You got killer monkeys. You've got ancient dinosaur freezy motherfuckers. You even got an appearance from the Mothra. Anyway, I think you should go check it out. If you're fans of King Kong or you're fans of Godzilla, you should check it out. Oh yeah. And guess what? Godzilla's just like a kitty cat. He likes to sleep in the Colosseum in Rome, all tucked up. Anyway, you should go check it out. This is the part of the show where we honor those who have died in the month of October. Roddy McDowell, Fright Night and Planet of the Apes. Janet Leigh from Psycho. Vincent Price, the best vampire of all time. And River Phoenix, who died on Halloween, way too young. And a bonus, Rodney Dangerfield. He may not have been horror related, but he was one funny dude. All these lost but not forgotten.
Ghouls and Fangs, Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe, we've got John Waters, but what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history, he's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And, you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore, so all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away, going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out. You know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you got to check it out because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bizarre Oddities shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.